Sir, one message.
Yeah.
Actually, our former professor Kumar Mitra sir passed away yesterday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I heard. I mean, I have seen like the pious post.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sir, can you observe 1 minute silence for him?
Very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll start now.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Wherever we are. Yeah. Yeah. He was the head when I joined the department.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Under his headship, I joined. Yeah, that was 2002.
Yeah. And I think after that he left and he joined Ravindra Bharati.
Yes. Vidyasagar, Ravindra Bharati. Anything related to Corona or what?
No idea, sir. No
Corona
idea.
last year, but then after complications, we don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But last time when I saw him, he was very weak and somehow he attended one seminar that Payasar did, but we saw him like he was very weak and not that well also.
Will you introduce the speaker?
Yeah, shall I start, sir?
Yeah, please. We can go ahead because
So, yes. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and I welcome you all once again on behalf of the Center for IKS, Assam University IKS Center. I welcome you once again to this two-day international conference on the theme, The Quest for Consciousness, Indian and Western Philosophical Approaches. This is the first session of our second day, and we have three speakers for this session, Professor Ravindra Nagendra, Professor R.T. Singh, and Professor Harishankar Prasad from Delhi University. So we have the first speaker with us. I welcome you, sir, and let me introduce our first speaker. Professor Ravindra Nagendra is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Neurophysiology, Center for Consciousness Studies at National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience, NIMHANS, Bengaluru. He was awarded with the National Prakruti Mandir Prize for Neurophysiology 2010, a national award for best scientific research. His research area of interest includes neurophysiology of sleep, sleep disorders and cognition, therapeutic aspects of mind-body intervention, neurophysiology of meditation and consciousness. Principal investigator, Professor Ravindra is engaged with many research projects till now. He has published many journals, both in national and international level. And apart from this, there are n number of conference and workshops he attended. So today, sir is going to talk on sleep of human consciousness by combining experimental neuroscience with phenomenological methods. It's a joint paper by Professor Ravindra Nagendra and Professor Bindu from NIMHANS Center for Consciousness Study. I welcome you, sir.
Professor Ravindra, please, you have 35-40 minutes of presentation and then leave some time for discussions. It's up to you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So, namaste to everyone and greetings from Center for Consciousness Studies from Bangalore. Then at the outset, I thank the organizer, Dr. Nagaraju and Dr. Munmun, to has given me this opportunity to share some views on how to approach consciousness from both, say, from the first person and also from the third person perspective. And so we here at NIMHANS, which is an institute of national importance, and which is one of the most premier institute as far as the neuroscience is concerned in Asia and also all over the world. Our Department of Neurophysiology has initiated these particular studies for understanding consciousness from the brain perspective way back in early 1980s by the most legendary scientist, Dr. P. Desiraju. But subsequently, after the demise of Dr. Desiraju, there was a very huge gap. Nobody were there to take up this particular thing it forward. But only when with Dr. Bindu, and I joined Dr. Bindu as a PhD scholar with her to understand the effect of say meditation practices on different behavioral aspects, and we focus on cognition and sleep because we know that there is a lot to offer from the Indian philosophical perspective to understand cognition, meditation, and also sleep. So with that perspective, we started our journey, and the result of this, say, 15 years of journey is this Center for Consciousness Studies, which was where our laboratory has given us, where the government has given the status as a center from last, say, 3 years. So one of the main objective of our center is to try to integrate as much as possible to, in a transdisciplinary way, to understand the Indian philosophical perspectives from neuroscience framework. Definitely, see, a lot of concepts, especially from Sankhya philosophy, has lots to offer to understand from the neuroscience perspective, the cognition and also the consciousness. So this is one of the common, area where the philosophers, like all of you people, and we from the neuroscience people, we can overlap and have a lot of, the mutual and the collaborative approach to try to understand what actually is cognition, what actually is mind, what actually you mean by emotion, what actually you mean by consciousness. So, and the other thing also that what we are looking is, it's not only on the intellectual deliberations, but how can we, understanding these things, it can be translated to the use of the common man, or maybe of a particular cohort. It can be for anything. It can be for the patient population, or it can be for students, or it can be for anybody, or it can be at the individual level also. So therefore, in our center, we are not restricting the students of only from the biology background. Probably I can assure you that in no other neuroscience institute or any other institute where you will be having a PhD scholar from various backgrounds. So we have PhD scholars from engineering background, because we need a lot of engineering stuff to understand the brain waves. So we have, say, from medical background, naturally we should have, we have from psychology background, and we also have from philosophy background. So in that way, the Center for Consciousness Studies at NIMHANS is very well equipped to have this transdisciplinary approach. So because every system of knowledge has its own core strength, and adding of these core strength will enable for us to try to understand the how is the lived experience, is really brought about. So I thought, okay, so I have to give you maybe 2 minutes of a bit of a brief what actually we are trying to do in the Center for Consciousness Studies. So do this little bit background, I would like to share my slides. Is the slides visible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, see, we have an everyday experience. Okay, we hear, we think. Okay, I feel, and we regard this as our conscious experience, a lived experience. Now, from the neuroscience perspective, whenever I say about consciousness, so you have to understand that I am telling consciousness from the small c perspective, not from a capital C perspective. Consciousness written with a capital C, right, has a different connotations. And if I write the consciousness spelling from the small c, has a different connotations from the language perspective also. So when I have this everyday mundane lived experience, momentary moment experiences that I'm having, what it is, from where it is coming. So is it a thing, or is it a force, or is it a process, or where it is located? So these are the very basic premise questions, that has been asked since millennia, and try to uncover what actually is this lived experience. But we know that even though in the earlier neuroscience concepts of how the brain used to work, earlier the thing was brain was working in a modular way. Now, what do you mean by a modular way? See, we know that every part of the brain has its own, a specific agenda. Like, right, you have a sensory cortex which processes the sensory information. We have a motor cortex which helps in the movement. We have something on the emotional part of the brain which involved in emotion. Certain few areas are involved in memory. So all these things are there. So earlier concept was that, okay, you have this modular thing, a very tight compartment, and these so areas are involved in this very specific, these functions. So that was the understanding of the earlier brain. With that particular understanding, so there was also an attempt to try to understand, is there any location of consciousness within the brain, especially with the neurosurgeon, where he tried to stimulate during operation every part of the brain and try to understand, okay, is there a consciousness here, is there a consciousness here, where this patient can really tell what actually is feeling. Then he told no. So there is no any location for the consciousness within the brain. But still we know, right, for our mundane experience, or it can be for our spiritual experience or meditative experience, whatever the experience, this biological system is very much needed. Otherwise, okay, this experience doesn't exist for me as such. So we need this biological system. So issue is how, even we know that we need this biological system to experience. Now, how is that, okay, we can, this biological system bring about this, this experience. But at the same time, we know that there is no any location for consciousness anywhere in the brain. So this was the, to give you the overview. So earlier, Francis Crick, who was a Nobel laureate, so he had a very firm opinion that all our, the subjective experience, it may be good or bad or sorrow, happy, joy, all those things, in one or the other way, right, you have a lot of chemicals in the brain, you have a lot of permutation and combination because of these interaction of different neural networks, and their associated molecules and chemicals will bring about some subjective experience. So again, the question comes into, how is this, right, this a lump of 2 to 2.5 kg of this physical entity called as brain will bring about such a subjective experience. And as a philosophy people, all of you know, right, this is what the David Chalmers gave as a hard problem of consciousness. How is that a physical system can bring about such a versatile, subjective experience. How is it possible? But still, the hard problem is always the hard problem of the consciousness that we have. So now, despite all these, the heterogeneous concepts on consciousness, but from the neuroscience perspective also, consciousness has three important features. One is the whatever that we are experiencing, whether it can be our lived day-to-day experience or it can be experience of your high ecstasy or meditative state experience, you have a unity of conscious experience. Now, what do you mean by unity of conscious experience? Now, unity of conscious experience is very simple, that you can say that, say, at this point of time, all of you are listening to me. At the same time, you are aware that where are you sitting, and you are aware that what I'm talking. And at the same time, some intellectual thing will be going on in your mind to understand, okay, what the speaker is telling about, right? And if you can see me in the video, you're also seeing me. But all these processes in the brain, vision, hearing, thinking, right, and contemplating upon that, it has a very modular compartment. As I said to you, the different areas of the brain are there. But for me, when I'm experiencing everything as if it is happening in a single event. So this is called as unity of experience. Even though you have multiple inputs, but for our experience, everything we experience as if, okay, everything is happening in a single thing. So it's like we are watching a movie, right? When the movie have a different frames, movie film has a different frames. But when this film is run in a particular, say, speed, so on the screen, it appears as if, okay, everything is happening in a single event that is happening. So this is one of the feature of any conscious experiences. We should have that unity of experience. And also within this unity, there is heterogeneity. So we can appreciate vision, we can appreciate sound, we can think, we can appreciate color. So everything is there. So there is also pluralism within this unity of experience. And also we have a graded complexity and intensity. Now this graded complexity and intensity, it depends on various other neural mechanisms. I won't go into those details, but three important things about the feature of any conscious experience is that we have a unity of conscious experience, there is a pluralism, and also you have a graded complexity and an intensity. So if this is our, say, day-to-day mundane, that is the experience that we have, right? So what is the primacy that on which a neuroscience can pitch in to try to understand, or what is the framework in which neuroscience wants to try to understand this particular lived experience? One is the primacy of consciousness. So all of us, even the physics also tells at this point of time, right? Consciousness is the substratum of the whole universe. So there is no doubt in that, right? But when it comes to a biological, say, framework, so how do we define it, or how do we say it? So what do you mean by a primacy of consciousness is how do we assess this lived experience, right? And most important is this particular experience, that whatever we are experiencing now, it is coming from within, even though we have many external triggering factors, right? So say now I'm speaking, sound waves are coming, it's going to through ears and it is reaching your brain. You're listening something, and you are, at the same time when you're listening to somebody, right, you are also feeling something. So this particular feeling which is triggered by the external stimuli is from within. So, right, so we have a lived experience, and this lived experience is emerging from within. Now, when something is coming from within, right, it is in the embodied condition. So we call this as embodied cognition. But now, what do you mean by embodied cognition? Okay, it is within this say aspect of this brain body framework. Okay, this particular experience is emerging. So we have a primacy of, say consciousness and primacy of embodiment are the two important things, right? We are trying to understand from the neuroscience perspective, right? What actually is this particular consciousness? Now, when it comes to the, so we know that to have this particular experience, mind plays an important role, right? But from the Western philosophical perspective, where when Descartes divided mind and body as a two separate entity, which gave rise to the reductionistic approach to the science, and we know what is the advantage of that and also the disadvantage of having a reductionistic approach to these things. So definitely, see, at this point of time, especially from the biological system, it can be like biochemistry, pharmacology, right? Trying to understand various mechanisms, always because of the reductionistic approach, we could able to figure it out how actually different, say, organs work or how, and that has really given to rise of the evidence-based medicine, like development of pharmacology, development of various medicines, and all those things was with a very strong, right, the philosophical input that came to this science with René Descartes, where he divided mind and body. Just because he said, see, body is what you can see, and we can dissect it out, we can objectify. Mind is what, okay, we cannot really do any objectification. So objectification is one of the primary thing for the say present day empirical evidence science. So there was a big division, but we know what is the limitation of that at this point of time, and we know that how actually body and mind, they're completely there, it's in the linked with each other. So when it comes to mind, right, and also from Indian philosophical perspective, mind is also considered as a very subtle matter. So in this particular framework, when mind is considered to be as a very subtle matter, right, then understanding the neural correlates, right, of the different aspects of the different aspects of mind, mind should not be a problem, because mind is a very subtle matter even from the Indian philosophical perspective. So when you have this mind-body problem, so how is that neuroscience that we approach this? So there are two important things. Number one, the phenomenological notion of the mind, right? Where we say that it is the seat of our conscious awareness, where a lot of philosophical ideas that comes into picture. But the same mind, right? Same mind, we have a computational point of view. When we have a computational point of view, right, we should have both hardware and the software. Hardware is the brain, and how actually the computational aspects of different neural networks bring about or it is related to this very subtle fine quality of mind. So we have the phenomenological notion of the mind and also the computational notion of the mind. What do you mean by this computational notion of the mind? So with this computational notion of the mind, it says that how actually these information, okay, is encoded, it is stored, it is processed, and it is retrieved. So all our experiences of today's lived experience, right, is because of how all these information is embedded, right, in the computational framework of mind or the computational framework of brain. So therefore, we have to understand phenomenological aspect of mind and also the computational aspect of mind. And when it comes to the computational aspect of mind, right, we have a very middle path way to approach like this mind-body problem. Now, but still, when we say consciousness, now we have to understand this consciousness is not a technical terminology. So even though empirical science works with the definitions, but if somebody asks what is the definition of consciousness, what is the framework of definition, framework in which we try to understand consciousness, there is no proper definitions. When there is no something as proper definition, right? with the present science, research framework, it is not a technical term at all. But still we use consciousness. So when we don't have a proper definition of consciousness, but still we know that it is a lived experience, right? How do we approach, right, these to try to understand consciousness now? So there are two important things from, say, computational mind or a computational brain perspective. Is that right? We have to ask the questions that what are the computational things that give rise to certain state of say brain and to a certain state of mind, right? So what are the explanations? So we try to understand this particular process. Having tried to understand this particular process, then we will ask for the explanation. But one thing we should be very clear: all these things are correlative. It is not causality, right? It is all it comes from in the form of a correlative aspects. So when you're understanding the consciousness, we have different aspects. We have the phenomenological aspects where I give my subjective report. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling happy, right? All those things, right? And from the third person perspective, we try to understand the information or the computation perspective. Okay, how this information is stored in the different areas of the neural network, right? And also how these things are represented. So with this framework, can we have a working definition or the working concept of to define what is the consciousness is? No doubt it is a phenomenological experience, but how is that the process in which an organism or a person who has an access to the brain system that generates this particular experience? Say, for example, say we undergo a meditation training. With our meditation training, we know that our subjective experiences will get very refined and refined and refined. So issue is what is happening here. What is happening here is that we are fine-tuning our neural network system in such a way that it has building its own capability to get access, right, to the different sorts of information that is stored within the brain. So this is the process. So for us, the consciousness is to try to understand the process, how I gain an access, right, to the different say brain system or the different computation brain network or that of a system. So with this background, then how is that we try to understand consciousness is into two aspects. One is the core consciousness. What do you mean by core consciousness? It is where you are giving any stimuli, you are giving any information. First and foremost thing that comes is yes, I'm. So we have the self, and self tells that okay, it's a process of knowing it. So that is core. Then after that, so all of us we know that, right? Because of lot of other cognitive things will add to it. It can be like memory, language, earlier experiences. All those things will add, and we give an explanation to that. So we get an access. That's called an access consciousness or the extended consciousness. Now, so the first and the foremost, the primary consciousness is that okay, I feel as okay, I have an access to a particular information, and subsequently is that okay, we add a lot of our the experiences, the memory, language, right, our prayers, our understandings, our intentionality, all to this particular that primary consciousness, and we give an explanation to it. So neuroscience has a very well equipped say the mechanism to try to understand this extended consciousness. How is that? Okay, I describe something. How is that? Okay, I describe, say, some feeling that I get. But if you ask me what actually is that feeling that you are getting, right? It will be very, very difficult. So this is the where now actually understanding from the philosophical perspective and also from the neuroscience perspective, right? We have to have a lot of discussions and dialogue to try to understand what actually you mean that the pure, say, awareness or the pure experience. So without coloring or without any the overlapping of our cognitive things to the pure experience. So therefore, approach to consciousness from neuroscience perspective will be both from the first person and also from the third person perspective. So coming to the brain as such, you know that we have a different waves, okay, when we record in EEG, and based on the frequency, we have named it as alpha, beta, theta, delta, gamma, so many things. And these particular waves, you know, it has been correlated, reproduced, right? It is associated with so many other our psychological attributes. So it can be theta with the sleep, right? Alpha with the relaxation, beta with concentration, and gamma is one thing, okay, which I told you, the unitary experience that we get, where the different modular compartment, they all should bind together to get the unitary experience. It is associated with gamma. So meditation studies have shown to increase gamma. It means that what? When you have a higher gamma or generating gamma in our brain, it means that our sense of experience will be more richer. So we have a very rich experience whenever we have the gamma synchrony or the gamma activity right within the brain. So this is one aspect. The other aspect is also there. Even with the advance in the neuroscience and try to understand how actually different neural network bring about this conscious experience, is that, okay, if you look at the neuroscience, we have a different types of neural network. So I'll give you a simple, say, for example, why is that we sometimes we are not aware of, say, my heartbeat, right? So there are so many other things. Okay, why is that I'm not aware of, say, movement of my intestine? Why is that I'm not aware of so many other things, right? But I'm aware of only of those say inputs that is coming from my five senses. We have so many other things also, but we are not aware of it. Why that we are not aware of it? From neuroscience perspective, when you try to understand the circuitry, right? So we have something called as feedback and feed forward circuits. Wherever there is a feedback circuit, we get that conscious experience. Say, for example, this is say in this particular experiment. So this area of the brain, what you see in the back of your head, is associated with the vision. So I give you a picture. You see a picture. You can consciously see the picture. When you're conscious, when is that you can see picture very consciously? When the information from the picture through your eyes, it goes to the back of the brain, and when these areas there interact with each other, so they should interact with themselves. So this is called as feedback. So information coming from V1, it is going to V2, going to V4, okay, going to some other areas within this. Okay, they should also have some exchange of information. When you have this particular feedback, then we have this conscious experience. If this particular feedback is not happening within the brain, we have only called as a feed forward. One information from V1 going to V2, V2 going to V3, V3 going to some. So the T areas, okay, even though we have this visual input, but I am not, as a person, I'm not consciously perceiving it. So from the brain perspective, wherever there is a feedback, right, you will have a very conscious perception. So having this feedback, right, is very, very important, not only for consciously perceiving, but also so many other things, even in the organizational setup, right? In the departmental setup, there should be a feedback. So when you have this feedback, right, this the information in the brain, it is processed at a different level, right, and we get this conscious perception. So two things that we understood now. One is what the gamma waves that is associated with our conscious perception. And this conscious perception is possible only in the brain wherever there is a feedback information that goes. When there is no feedback information, right, we don't have that conscious perception at all. And this is the reproduced, right, experimental evidence and truth. So suppose if you are listening to me, you are consciously perceiving me, it is as simple as that. That information that is going to your brain is in your feedback circuit. Therefore, right, you are consciously listening to me or seeing. That is one. So now, but the other important aspect also is that the role of attention or the awareness in our conscious experience. So this is the whole of your the meditation practices. Now, the studies have clearly shown, though in our philosophy we have this, say, panchendriyas, where all sensory information that goes to the brain with our sensory organs, but the sensitivity of these receptors, it can be touch, pain, okay, the taste, hearing, the eyes, okay, all these things, those sensitivity of those receptors can be modulated by attention. So therefore, in all your meditation practices, whenever there is an attention is given to whatever it is, say in a very simple way, you are attending to your breath. So when we are attending to our breath, these sensory receptors that are responsible for this breath, okay, gets more and more modulated. So that means to say that an act of attention, right, increases the sensitivity of these peripheral, okay, these receptors, right? So the incoming information, the sensitivity of the incoming information will also change. So this is the basis of in which where the neuroscience approaches how do we study meditation. So in the meditation, we have so many other networks, right? We have default mode of network where my mind wanders. Then I focus and I attention. When I focus on something, so you focus on breath, you focus on mantra, you focus on whatever it is, right? So your mind wandering comes down and your whole brain is focusing on something. When our whole brain is focusing on something, right, the information that is coming from that particular the sensory system will be very, 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 very refined. So when we have that refined information that goes to the brain, right, again, my experience of that the same sensation will be different. So, right? So therefore, we have many networks in the brain like that: alerting network, default, salience, executive, orientation. These networks, they get connected, right, when our mind is trained, right, with this meditation practices. And the efficiency of these networks will bring about different sorts of experiences. So it all depends on which network is very, very strong with each other. So till at this point of time, I gave you the overview that, right? So our mundane experience or our meditative experiences, it is correlated with a lot of neural network that can happen, right? And the how the different networks are linked with each other. Stronger the network between different brain regions, a particular type of experience is more and more it's emerging, right? Now, so how does this brain works? Brain works in both in the temporal and also in the spatial coherence. Means at every given point of time, in every given point of space, we have a different types of brain waves that are interacting with each other. So I've given you just an example over here. say this is in a time. So you're seeing a face, right? So at time, say the first second I saw the face, then subsequently I recognize who is that particular person is, right? Not only recognition of face, then I recognize what type of emotion, okay, that particular person has. Even though this has a very distinct points in the time scale, but when you record the brain waves, right, you have a different brain wave that is coming over here. So till here you have the first person experience. I saw a face, I recognize the person. Not only recognize the person, I recognize, okay, what is the emotion that is present on this particular face. So correspondingly, if I record brain waves, right, I can see different brain waves emerging, right, at different points. So now I can lock, okay, when I saw the face, what are the waves? When I recognize the face, what are the waves? When I recognize the emotion, what are the things, okay, that is there. So this is how where the first person and the third person perspective is getting correlated. So now there is a lot of evidences to say that, okay, when these different neural networks, right, they interact with each other, right, the particular thing is what is experienced. So say for example, if I didn't say a visual stimuli is shown to me, I didn't see the face at all, then definitely, right, the network will be entirely different over here. So I'm just giving you a logical way of explaining that how, right, these first person and the third person, it is getting interacted. So having, see, another important aspect also where this first person and third person is there. So in one of the study, they said that, okay, you have a meditators, right, there in the scanner, they put in the EEG, say recording and all. And so they were asked to press the button whenever they feel, okay, that they are in a very ecstasy state, or they feel very blissful. So every time when a meditator, a very experienced meditator, he pressed the button, he said that now I'm feeling very happy, I'm feeling very ecstatic, right? That aha moment with the meditation practices. Every time when they press the button, EEG very clearly showed, right, there is a very high gamma activity. So therefore, subsequently it was told that, okay, all your high what experiences states, okay, it is associated with gamma. So we know now that my meditative experience, okay, is associated with gamma activity. So I have a first person and I have a third person. Now, if I know that, okay, there is some third person entity, objective evidence, which is reflecting my phenomenological experiences. So will it be possible for me to induce this particular, say, brainwave artificially in the brain and see whether the person also feels the same thing? So this is what the whole issue now it is emerging called as neurofeedback. What actually you mean by that of a neurofeedback? Say for example, okay, see attention. Attention is one of the primary psychological attribute to have the lived experience and also for the meditative experience. Attention and awareness, it should be there. So when somebody is trained to have a more and more attention, right, one particular wave called as frontal midline theta is recorded. So when frontal midline theta wave is more, it means that, okay, person is highly is in an immersive state. Okay, he's an immersive experience. He's experiencing that immersive state. So now, so therefore, then subsequently there were the experiments. So when they showed that, okay, now what I'll make a person to sit in the front of a system. I'll be recording a EEG. Then, so I'll ask him to concentrate or focus on something. So there is a slowly emerging of the frontal midline theta, that is the EEG wave, and this EEG wave is again, okay, given a different color grade. If your this particular wave is less, okay, your color is very light blue. So, and you have to make this particular color to be very, very strong or very dark blue. Means that what you have to increase your FM theta wave. So if you want to increase your FM theta wave, what should happen? You should more and more and more try to focus or try to give an attention. So now, so first person, what I'm doing, I'm experiencing the process of getting more and more attentive to any particular, say, stimuli. But at the same time, and what is the feedback that I'm getting? Feedback, what I'm getting is the brain wave that is recorded. So based on this, right? So my experience is recorded.
Professor,
yeah, I'll be in 2 minutes. I'll finish it.
Please.
Yeah. So then the other things is also there, okay, in which the brain works, because it's the predictive brain. So brain as a Bayesian mechanism, it predicts, and the prediction, it happens on my priors. PRIORS. What is my anticipatory thing that is present in my mind? So this is where the whole philosophy of Sankhya and philosophy of Advaita and the goal of achieving the highest realization comes into picture. So when you have more and more prayers, or where my predictive capacity, comes down and down. So whenever the instruction is given to have the present moment experience, not linking to the past or to the future. Any meditation school, this is the instruction that is given. You have to experience at this point of time. So when I learn this particular skills, right, my predictive capability of my brain will be very, very less. So that, yes, so my brain will get the information at this moment, right, and have that particular lived experience. So now the whole shift of neuroscience is trying to understand that how this predictive capability of the brain and the variations in this predictive capability, right, brings about a lot of these the subjective, these experiences. So I skipped a lot of slides. So because of the time constraints, so this is my last slide. So with this lot of changes in the predictive capability, right, is one of the hypothetical mechanism to have how these spiritual practices can bring about, or it can transcend all my sensory and motor perception and that of an awareness. So still the question comes, right? So 3 important questions from the neuroscience perspective that I have to ask, right? Now, if at all the goal of having a pure experience or the conscious experience is to transcend the other mundane experiences, then why is that we have to undergo this particular training, right? Where we have to sharpen our mundane awareness and experiences and then transcend, right, this limited sensory experience, because this is the path in which we have to go. Why this particular path do we need? It's just for an intellectual discussion, right? Next. Now, to the path towards this particular pure experience is through this biological system. So how do we understand this biological system, okay, from a different perspective? Not only in terms of molecules, not only in terms of oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, or anything. How do we understand this whole biological system, right? Through which, right, our both the mundane experiences and the ecstasy of the spiritual experiences are experienced. So there is a separate way in which we have to approach this particular problem. So does that mean that, right, our experience of pure experience, it has to through understanding a proper biology, because we have to use this mind-body complex to transcend this particular experience. So how is that the philosophy can add for a better understanding of this mind-body complex? So these are the three important elementary questions till at this point of time neuroscience has, for which the philosophy has many things to contribute in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. It was self-explanatory, your talk, and very lucid. Though most of these students are all from philosophy background, etc., but still, we could relate and grasp what you were saying. It's interesting. I mean, I was at Maharshi University of Management at Fairfield, and saw all those machines that they were, they teach what is called the transcendental meditation technique, TM technique. And of course, they take a lot of money, dollars, but they teach 1 month course. And then, I had a friend there in the laboratory, so he would take me there and show me before meditation, after meditation, and how those gamma waves actually become more harmonious after, certain years of practice of meditation. Very interesting studies. I mean, those Americans want proof all the time, so they were collecting the proof as to how there is more harmony in the brain functioning when such practices, meditative practices, are done. That's pretty interesting. And then I probably you were also referring, and then I raised this question to this fellow John, or somebody was there, that why don't you have a machine which actually can bring all these alpha, beta, gamma waves into proper harmony? Why do you want to measure it after the meditation? Create a machine which can actually bring harmony in the brain functioning. That was on the light. And so he said, no, we don't have such brains. We can only measure how it's functioning, but we can't regulate the brain itself.
It's a now we have certain techniques where we can regulate the different areas of the brain also. We have what is called as neuromodulatory techniques. And this is very well used, actually. Even say a person who, like, say for example, attention deficit disorders, ADHD kids, right? Where even they cannot really put their attention to one particular aspect. Right? You have a lot of this neuromodulatory thing, where on the surface, we can stimulate certain areas of the brain and see that these particular waves are generated there, and correspondingly, we have that behavior is also evolved. So see, most of the behavior at this point of time, it is correlated. Again, I'm telling you, it is correlation. It is not a causality. Right? It is correlated with different areas of the brain. There is no doubt in that. But most important thing, right, when it comes to the aspect of self, we are nowhere. So what actually is this? How this sense of I, or the sense of self, is generated in this biological system? So what is that philosophy can contribute in understanding how this is evolved? Or is there something called as self, or is it just a construct? We don't know. So this is where I think a lot of philosophy should guide actually the neuroscience.
There are a few passages which I came across in Vedic, literature. Actually, in one of the places, it goes on to say, where is the self? And the discussion is that, of course, we don't. Using the word self is also difficult. Atman, where is the Atman in the body? Was the question, and they said it's in the entire body. It is spread all over the body. That is one answer. I don't remember which Upanishad I am referring to. And in other case, in Narayana Sukta, there is a reference to actually they are searching for the seat of consciousness in the heart, nearby the heart. So the search is not in the brain at all. So I was
definitely, yes. You're absolutely right. See, there is a great wisdom in this, in Narayana Sukta. where they want to understand what actually the core of our feeling. So is in the heart.
The line now I remember. Padmakosha pratikashagum hrudayancha pyadhomukam adhonishthya vitasyante nabhyam uparitishthati jwalamala kulam bhati. That's a description there.
Okay.
So it's upside down, that too. And such a, I don't know what is that measurement, and is of the size of a Nivara Shuka. Nivara Shukam is a rice variety. It's a rice variety of the size of a rice, upside down, and all the description there. No, very. See, but those are meditative insights and not logical.
Definitely. See, of course. Definitely. See, we have to value these meditative insights. There is, see, that is a technology that they had, right? So we should value these meditative insights. See, for example, I'll tell you a very common experience. When you get up in the morning from your sleep, and when somebody says, I had a very good sleep, where this experience of having a good sleep comes from? How do you say that I had an experienced sleep? Where was this I when you went to a deep sleep state? But still, when you get up, everybody tell that I had a sleep, right? So where was this concept of I within this embodied system? And that I has to be, it cannot be discontinuous, right? There should be a continuity for this. Whenever there is a temporal continuity, then only we can remember. When you have a temporal block, so memory is lost. We cannot remember. This is a simple neuroscience fact. So you put the same thing over here. So how this is? I mean, from the mind-body complex. So there should be something, but we don't know. We have to approach these issues in a different paradigm.
Yeah. Anybody has a question, you can put it in the chat box, and then Professor R.P. Singh ji, welcome to the conference.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
You have any comment to make on the earlier paper?
So just one line comment,
please.
That the quest for Atman is basically a subject matter of anubhava, of experience. So by any cognitive or epistemic means, we are prone to failure. It has to be just realized, experienced, anubhava kind of a thing. Yeah. So that's the only way that Shankara has shown about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
But my thing is, see, this anubhava should be within this mind-body complex. Without this mind-body complex, where this anubhava will come from?
Yeah, I mean to say that, I mean, see, yes. Otherwise, there is the ocean of consciousness, but at least to begin with, we start with the mind-body complex, but then probably once there is anubhava, probably that must be transcending the mind-body complex when it gets into, Atma.
See, you see, even if you take from Advaitic concept to the consciousness is ever pervading, it is there everywhere. But even to have the experience of that, we need this biological system, no? As a person, me, to have that experience, I need this biological system. So how do I understand that from philosophy perspective?
There are a couple of questions as to, again, yesterday also there were a lot of discussions about the question of individuation, and then, the whole question of how, if it was one in the beginning, one universal consciousness, what was the delimiting force that brought in so many, how come the individuation has happened? The whole idea of creation, projection, etc. And then the whole reverse effort of coming out of this transcendental illusion, what goes by the mostly misunderstood term Maya. So I prefer most of the time to use avidya or agnana instead of Maya. I avoid it in the classroom. Shunya and Maya have created havoc in academic circles. So both the words I try to avoid. So, but there is, if we go by avidya or agnana, so that's responsible for individuation and the whole effort of again coming out of that limitation of avidya. Then in that sense, definitely, we start with the body and mind, and then it's perfection and purification through maybe karma yoga, again, all those Raj Yoga, and then Gnana, etc., etc. And then end of the day, what that realization would be like, and when there is such an anubhava, what still is the role of the body and mind, again, is discussed in terms of Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti. So again, both the areas.
Sir, I just want to share one of my observations, sir. Sir, as per my reading of Advaita Vedanta, Professor Nataraju, please tell me if I'm wrong. But what we consider, as you said, sir, Ravindra sir, that we need a biological body to understand what is consciousness. But we Advaita, particularly Vedanta and also Shankha, we see that they don't identify consciousness with mind or with body, first of all. But that doesn't mean that they say that both are separate. The entire process was to distinguish what consciousness is, but not to separate it, say, like not to consider it that it is something isolated entity. Just like the way we cannot separate the ocean and waves, but we can identify the waves, but it is there. It is something already there. So like that, consciousness is there, but we cannot identify with mind or either with body, but we can distinguish it. This is one. And second thing, that's a reason why even during sleep also they consider that there is consciousness, and that's why when we wake up and we say that we had a good sleep or sound sleep, it's because when consciousness is still there. That is what Advaitic understanding is. And what is absent there is the body, the function of the body. It's not the body absent. There's a function of the body or the function of the mind. That mind become inactive at that time. That's all. That's what I understand.
Yeah, that's what I told you, that when from Advaita perspective, you have a consciousness that is ever pervading always, right? But for me to experience whatever, it can be a mundane experience or a spiritual experience, right? I should experience through this mind-body complex. So say you yourself told, say in a deep sleep state, right? When body is completely rest, mind is completely still, right? I'm not experiencing anything. But still at that point of time, consciousness is there. There is no doubt in that. So the whole thing is that, okay, how is that we have to understand this mind-body complex in a different perspective, not as a limitation, but as a tool to understand or to experience, but all if you have the ever pervading consciousness. So my approach to understand or research in meditation is this. This meditation practices, right? It fine-tunes my mind-body complex to have a more proximity to understand the all-pervading consciousness, presuming that there is an all-pervading consciousness.
Yeah, maybe as a boat to cross the river, but not to carry the boat after crossing the river.
Yeah, that is it.
Becomes a burden.
Yeah,
It's only till we cross the river.
Yeah.
A ladder only to climb the building and then to throw it away. That way.
That is there.
Yeah, it's nice. So, thank you, Professor Ravindra. We'll be associated, and hope you get associated with our department in our futuristic endeavor also. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
We have our next speaker, Professor R.P. Singh from Center for Philosophy, JNU. He needs no introduction. He has been associated with our department for over a decade or so, and I am also, I have seen him, heard him several times through our Vedanta Congress seminars, India and the US. Dr. Munmun, you have an introduction for the speaker?
Yes, sir. Professor Singh, welcome to the second day of our international conference. And let me just take this opportunity once again to introduce Professor R.P. Singh. Professor Singh, with 43 years of research and teaching experience, is at present Professor of Center for Philosophy, School of Social Science, JNU, New Delhi. He has been twice chairperson of Center for Philosophy, thrice member of the Academic Council and the University Court, besides being member and chairperson of various committees in the university. He has also been twice member of ICPR and the governing body of council, besides being member of the board of studies of many universities in India. He has to his credit 20 books and over 180 articles published in different peer-reviewed journals in India and abroad. And besides being member of the editorial board of many national and international journals. His specialization includes German idealism, postmodernity, consciousness, Indian and Western perspectives, studies in ethics, civilization and cultural studies, Upanishads, Vedanta, Buddhism, human rights, multiculturalism, globalization, philosophy of education, etc. He also teaches research methodology concerning dialectics, skepticism, foundationalism, anti-foundationalism, hermeneutics, deconstruction, etc. So today, Professor Singh will make his presentation on notion of absolute consciousness, whatever is of the, as well as in the absolute, Shankara, Kant and Hegel. Welcome, sir. Hearty welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Munmun and Professor Nataraju. So I'm really very grateful. Am I audible to you? Is it okay?
Yes,
Yes,
Professor.
sir. Yes.
Very much.
So really, in fact, this is a fascinating theme you have floated for the international conference, the quest for consciousness and the perspectives both East and West. That is something which is very, fascinating about it. And fascinating for more than one reason, because it takes us to a kind of, comparative study. It was actually since 1940 onwards that comparative study started becoming very, substantive phenomenon in philosophical discourses. Before that, there were, studies concerning, commentaries and critiques, and within the tradition itself, or maybe in association with some other traditions very close to it, but not a tradition which is as far as East and West kind of a thing. That was too ambitious in the beginning. So 2-3 things I would like to clarify, and then I'll come to the main issue. First thing, that whenever we begin philosophy, whether it is Plato or Aristotle, Kant, Hegel, Shankara, Sankhya philosophy, anything, without comparison, we cannot go into it. Any issue concerning justice or knowledge or values in the Eastern tradition and in the Western tradition requires some kind of a comparison. So if we, for instance, talk about dialectics, then Plato, Hegel, Marx, Kant, they all come together because it's such a theory-loaded concept, and various issues will come up. Similarly, if we are talking about Shankara's notion of consciousness, then along with that, the Sankhya system will come up, the Buddhist tradition will also come up. So comparison is bound to come up. Now the problem arises that what could be the normative dimension of it? There are different traditions, different viewpoints, and there is historical, there is cultural, there is geographical distances between them, like the East and the West kind of a thing. So how to, work it out? There are 2-3 ways to do it. One that, suppose I'm comparing Kant with Hegel and also Shankara. Then was Kant aware of anything of Vedanta, or Hegel aware of anything of Vedanta philosophy? So some substantive, documents have to be, floated in order to understand it, so that the comparison starts. And sometimes it happens that even if there is no such evidence, then philosophy is such a foundational subject that, people think, they're prone to think in that direction. Just like the basic biology, basic psychology is the same everywhere. Similarly, the basic questions of philosophy also are the same, whether it is Greek philosophy, Chinese philosophy, Indian, or Western for that matter. So most basic questions remain the same kind of a thing. So this is one thing. So normative skepticism is to be addressed in a very, substantive manner. Second thing is that certain issues like incommensurability, there are certain terms which just cannot be translated into another language. Even Maya, Avidya, Adhyas, Jnana, Yoga, these are not translatable kind of, concepts. So generally my article is published abroad. I put these terms in the Sanskrit term only. And I suggest that, look, these are the very, we can say that these are the nearest cognates of it, but not the substitute of it, not the exact translation of it. So I will suggest that you use the, exact term. Like if I am reading Heidegger, there are many terms which I use the way Heidegger has used in German language, or Kant has used, or Hegel has used it in German language, because it becomes very difficult to translate it into any other language in that way. So incommensurability is something which is a problem. People are trying to sort it out. And in fact, my friend Jeffrey Armstrong, he has written a new Bhashya on Bhagavad Gita, and he has come out with 200 such Sanskrit terminologies which just cannot be translated into any other language. And we all have to accept it. And now I think Indian philosophy is in a position that we can strongly say that, look, you have to accept it. So these are our terms. And in order to understand, like bhakti cannot be translated as devotion only. It's much more than devotion kind of a thing. Jnana is also, as a prama, is more substantive than the epistemology kind of a thing, in the West. So this kind of a thing. And these are some of the, clarifications which we need to have, before we venture into the domain. So what I have done is that I've taken up both the traditions, and whenever we are comparing one philosophical system with another, one tradition with another tradition, then we are not doing a new kind of a philosophy, but we are definitely a new philosopher, because our language has changed now. It has become very substantive and much wider in a way. So to float this idea, so if in the West we try to understand the consciousness or the metaphysics of consciousness, either in terms of being one or monist kind of a thing, or dualist or pluralist, then who are those who are monists in the Western tradition of the term, or who are those who are monist in Indian tradition? So this way we can articulate, thing like in the West we have Thales, Plato, Hegel, Marx, even Einstein also to a great extent. They were our monists. And then dualists like Empedocles, Descartes, Kant. In Indian tradition, Advaita Vedanta could be regarded as the monastic tradition. And dualism we have in Sankhya, in Madhva philosophy we have. Pluralism is there in Epicurus, Leibniz, Hume, and others. In Indian tradition we have in Jainism, in Nimbark's tradition, Vedanta tradition of that thing. And then there is a understanding reality in terms of flux, like Heraclitus in the West, and the same time, almost the same period of time, In India also, Buddha was thinking also in terms of momentariness. But to elaborate these concepts, they all have different epistemic positions, and which in fact put them completely, different from one tradition to another traditions. And some of the elements like earth, water, fire, air in the tradition of Greek philosophy, and ether in Indian tradition. So this way, so the first idea which I would like to place before is that whenever we are trying to have any kind of a quest for consciousness, then we are trying to understand it whether it is one or two or many. Everything is possible. Just as I say that everything is not philosophy, but everything can be philosophized, provided you have the substantive arguments to elaborate it. Similarly, the doctrine of one, that there is only one consciousness, that can also be defended with substantive arguments. Two, like Madhva and others, it can be substantiated, and even pluralism can also be substantiated with different set of arguments. Even one, when we talk about one, that also is not one. There are many kind of one, like Kevala Dvait is monism, and even in Shuddha Dvait, Advait is there. Yeah, Visishta Dvait, Advait is still there. Yeah, but in a certain way. Dvaita Dvait, Advait is there, dualism is also there. This kind of thinking is there. So Advait is also of many kinds within Vedanta tradition also. And they have their own arguments to substantiate this position. So this is the first question that we'll keep in the mind, that whether it is one, two, or many. Then we proceed towards understanding of the very question of metaphysics or ontology. What exactly it is. Then only we can put consciousness in the metaphysical or ontological categories or conceptual frame. So for that, I have an insight taken from Heidegger, his article written in 1927 and then later on in 1932 also, Being and Time. Then what is metaphysics? These two articles. What Heidegger places before us is that both metaphysics and ontology, they are all in search for the absolute, absolutum, fundamentum absolutum. But pre-Socratic philosophers, they were basically ontologists, because that time epistemology was not much developed, and they floated only the idea of what being is. With Socrates and afterwards, epistemology started playing very important. So when we try to understand reality or the notion of absolute with the help of epistemological categories, according to Heidegger, then it becomes metaphysics, not ontology. And if categories and concepts are not used, but still the notion of being is floated, then it becomes ontology. And within ontology, he has ontic also, which refers to the plurality of things existing around us. What is so important here is that Heidegger says that when metaphysics came up, then some kind of errancy or error took place in philosophical discourses. The error was that epistemologies keep on changing. And with the change of epistemology, you find that metaphysics also changes. And sometimes situation comes to such a stage that there is epistemology, but there is no metaphysics. So there are many philosophers, positivists are there, Hume is there. So they have the pluralistic position, epistemology, but they don't have metaphysical entities at hand. So Heidegger thinks that in such a study, there are very big challenges for the metaphysical quest. And another element which Heidegger has in the mind is that, whenever we are trying to understand the being, pure being, Sein, kind of a thing, or maybe the Dasein, then the notion of being is something which is obliterated, and what we are left with, the way things appear to us. So this obliteration is something which is, which one has to find it out, that how and how much has it been, done. Now, what are the fundamental approaches to understand the notion of consciousness, the quest for consciousness? I have three such approaches before me. One is the psychological way of looking at it, in which we begin with our analysis into what goes on in our mind, the antahkarana, and try to find out the absolute in it. So, we have the indriyas, then we have the manas, and in the manas we have jnana, we have pragya, we have buddhi, pragya, and saundarya, but still we find that absolute has not yet merged. Then we go to the chitta, we go to the ahankara, then we go to the witness aspect of it. So this is one way of looking at it. The other is that cosmological way of doing it, that we begin our with an estimation of what is there in the outside world, and try to establish an absolute causality regarding the nature, the way it happens in the Nasadiya Sukta. If you look at the Nasadiya Sukta, the unmanifest has been given overemphasis, as it supersedes the manifest world. Na sadasi, no sadasi dani met. Or its more nuanced expression can be seen in the Sankhya system, where they talk about inverted tree, in which we find that the trunk, the branches, the fruits, the leaves are in this world, but the roots are somewhere in the unmanifest. And some other such conceptions can be found even in the Ritas also. So Ritas has cosmic order, and moral order comes, dharma comes when we follow the Ritas about it, because it's the job of the Purush to follow the Ritas. Nature is a gift from the Ritas. So these are the cosmological way of looking at it, and cosmocentric approach can be taken up to understand it. And in the West, the pre-Socratic philosophers, they also had, cosmological approaches to understand the, everything. Water, fire, air, ether, atom, flux, everything is there. And in very many ways, they were all trying to understand it. That is the cosmological approach. And the third one is the theological way of looking at it, in which the concept of God is placed as the ultimate unifying force between the inner world and the outer world. So, in some way, the Atman and Brahman also is supposed to articulate this kind of thing, but it's no longer a theology kind of a thing. So it's another way of looking at it. Hegel's notion of Geist is also, spirit is also something very close to it. Now there were two philosophers who had put some kind of very special emphasis on this notion. One is Descartes in the modern philosophy. He has taken up the help from only one concept, that is the concept of existence. And he has applied it to understand the cogito, mind, body, and also God. Mind exists, body exists, God exists. So only one category has been used to understand the three entities, which are in Descartes' own viewpoint are mutually different kind of a thing. Mind and body are diametrically opposed. Res cogitans and res extensa cannot meet in principle, but they are dependent on God. But the category is the only one, that is existence, which he has used very substantially. The other person is Spinoza, who was trying to overcome Cartesian dualism, and he proposed that ultimate reality is something which can exist on its own, self-conceived, self-existent, and self-caused. And this he took up as a nature kind of a thing. Nurturing nature and natured nature. Natura naturans, natura naturata kind of a thing. I remember in 1929, Einstein was asked a question that, do you believe in God? He said, yes, I do believe in God, but my God is not a theological God. I believe in a God the way Spinoza believed into it. Spinozistic God. So that becomes nurturing nature and natured nature. But this kind of a position is something which can be, of course, understood as a pantheistic, as panentheistic, even atheistic. There are very many Soviet writers who have always thought that Spinoza was an atheist. So, but the important thing is that it is self-caused, self-conceived, and self-existent. So we cannot look at it, try to explain it in terms of causality outside of it. So these are the two major contributions which started coming up to understand the notion of God, the notion of absolute, or the category of existence, how it is to be understood. And when we come to Immanuel Kant, and the way I have thought of comparing him with Shankara, so the actual sources can be found in his book, which he had written in 1795, Perpetual Peace. There are 3 definitive articles, and the third definitive article in which he has taken up the notion of Om and has tried to understand it as something which is absolute and can be compared with something which is there in the Greek philosophy or even in the Chinese philosophy also. So then he has given elaborate analysis of the Om as it is found in the Upanishads also. So that means that some kind of information regarding the notion of Atman had reached to him. And then elsewhere I have done this kind of a work with Professor D.P. Chattopadhyay, and I have traced it very substantially that 1705 Aurangzeb had died, and around 50 years before Aurangzeb's death, Dara Shikoh had translated Bhagavad Gita and some of the Upanishads in Persian. And those texts has reached there at the University of Königsberg, Berlin, and other places also, because they had the Arabic chairs in their universities. So some kind of a debate had, of course, taken place. And later on, when we come to Hegel, we find that things have become very substantively available to us. Schopenhauer was one who has worked extensively. Schelling has done, Fichte has done, and Hegel himself had reviewed the 5 lectures which Humboldt had given on Bhagavad Gita at the University of Berlin in 1825. So there was information of Shankar's philosophy and to the German intellectual tradition that time. Now what Kant does in the preface of the Critique of Pure Reason, he says that human reason has this peculiar fate that in one species of its knowledge, it is burdened by questions which, as prescribed by the very nature of reason itself, it is not able to ignore, but which, as transcending all its powers, it is also not able to answer, unquote. So there are certain questions pertaining to the nature of consciousness, to the cosmos as a whole, and to the notion of God, which can not be answered in terms of the categories that we have, the 12 categories which Kant has floated, the synthetic a priori knowledge which we are generally having, but this cannot answer those questions. But these questions can also not be ignored because they arise out of reason itself. And this is where he proposes a critique of reason. That means reason becomes the subject and the predicate of the critique, kind of a thing. And his contention is that I must limit knowledge to the phenomenal world. And the nominal world should be made free from applicability of these categories. And if we apply these categories to them, to nominal entities, then paralogism and antinomies and things like that will emerge. So he was trying to put some kind of restriction. And this was the need also of the time when Kant was writing. That time, a lot of clashes were there between science and religion. And, that was the time when, from physics, people had started finding out that from physics, it is possible to go to chemistry. It's quite possible that, all the atoms and everything else, then we go to chemistry. And then from the chemistry, they found out that from chemistry, we can go to biology, botany, and zoology also, because these are the chemically organized in a certain manner, along with, of course, the physics is there. And when you come to biology, then the question of consciousness also emerges. That means it has given rise to the question of consciousness. And in order to avoid any kind of logical fallacy like ex nihilo, then we have to presuppose that it means consciousness was present in an implicit manner at the level of physics, and then gradually it started explicating itself in chemistry, in biology, and later on in consciousness studies, and then the other way around also. Sri Aurobindo talks about evolution and involution, kind of a thing. So this process also goes on. And here, in fact, many of the present day scientists, which I will not be able to take it, but they say that when the inquiry concerning physics reaches to the level of electrons, protons, and neurons, then none of these three elements can be seen by any means, by any computer. We simply presuppose it, presume it, otherwise our quest will not, in fact, start about it. So this again is a kind of problematic that needs to be sorted out. So what Immanuel Kant is contesting is that now epistemology has to be restrained so that things are things go to the sphere what he calls as faith, kind of a thing, and not knowledge. Now it is under this kind of situation that we come to Hegel's position. Hegel has, first of all, to answer to the questions which Kant had raised, the epistemological issues, its limitations, and everything else, which he, of course, by saying that categories have no limits and categories are dynamic, and categories are not fixed the way Kant had thought about it. These are dynamic ones. So they understand the dynamism of the whole of reality. And you cannot draw any limit to the categories. Hegel wanted to see everything in a from a holistic perspective, that not the kind of dualism or faith and knowledge divide kind of a thing which Kant had. So for Hegel, everything goes in terms of something which is called a kind of a whole. In the phenomenology, he has said that the true is the whole, but the whole is nothing other than the essence consummating itself through its development. Because for him, the dialectics is operating from less perfect ideas to more perfect ideas, and still more and much more, and coming to the absolutely perfect idea, which he, according to him, is the Christian theology that he finds at the absolute one. One may question about it, but this is what Hegel's position is. Some of the prejudices which Hegel had, one was regarding the Christianity as the absolute religion, and the other, the Prussian state as the absolute development of the society. In fact, Marx also questioned it, that look, if there is alienation in Prussian society, the capitalist life which is there, then how can it be regarded as the absolute stage of society? It has to be overcome. The struggle has to come up to overcome the contradictions of capitalist society. So it's the case about theological aspects of it. So of the absolute, it must be said that it is essentially a resultant. So for him, absolute means something which comes out at the end. So the kind of finality, a kind of notion which he has, this again has a reflection to biblical myth of the day of the judgment, the final day of the judgment. In that finality aspect has come up. And he thought that that will be the final stage, beyond which we find that there's no way out. Many philosophers have questioned it, the finality aspect of it. Derrida has very substantially argued against it, that we can talk about the movement and another movement, further movement, but there is no final kind of essence. Finality is to be repudiated. But for him, because he has the messianic notion, and though of course the Messiah is not there, even Marx also has the finality kind of a thing. So that way Marx was also influenced by the theological ideas. So because there is finality, in a way he was a messianic, but there is no Messiah in Marxism, the way it happens in Christianity. So he has messianism without Messiah, Marx. So, but moving and developing and reaching to a stage of finality, that has the Christian theological, underlining spirit, which is there. And it's there in Hegel and in Marx, but in a different manner. And many people have challenged this kind of a notion. So the finality, the result has to come up, which is at the end, it is truly what it is. And that precisely in this consists its nature, that is to be actual subject, the spontaneous becoming of itself. So that means it's only the consciousness which can justify the notion of absolute. Without consciousness, even the absolute cannot be justified. So this is what he has proposed in the phenomenology of spirit, and later on in his lectures on philosophy of history, Hegel has again done the same kind of a job. Just one or two more issues I'll bring up on Hegel, and then I'll come to Shankara's philosophy. So in Hegel, there is spirit, there is idea, and also there is nature. All the three entities, they retain their autonomy. In fact, nature is something which exists independently there. But idea is also something which has its independent existence. But idea is, related to nature. And nature is also related to ideas, according to Hegel. So, and it is the spirit which mediates between them. So spirit or the consciousness is the middle point between idea and nature. So it is with the help of the spirit that movements take place. And contradiction is the root of all kinds of movements. Because there are contradictions, so spirit will try to overcome those contradictions and move ahead from less perfect to more perfect and much more, and finally coming to the absolute perfection. So this movement is initially in the quantitative manner, and gradually in the course of time, it becomes qualitative. Between idea and nature, there is a constant unity and struggle of opposites. And with the intervention of the spirit, that opposites can be reconciled and we can move towards a higher stage of existence. And then finally, the law of negation, that means the notion of development. So that ideas develop from less perfect position to more perfect and much more, and finally to the absolute perfection. And it is the spirit which is the unifying agency, between everything which is around us. It's not like Immanuel Kant, where nominal entities cannot be grasped. For Hegel, everything falls within the realm of experience, knowledge, and the unifying capability of the spirit. So consciousness is something which is elevated to the extent that it becomes one and absolute. So if in the West there is Hegel as a philosopher of one thought, in India we find that Shankara is also a philosopher of one thought. To a great extent, even Heidegger is also having that consciousness is one. That element has come up, as one kind of a thing. So, but Hegel and Shankara can meet, at this point that it is one. From Kant, it could be derived that like the I think level consciousness is some kind of, witnessing consciousness in Immanuel Kant, which again is very close to what we have the Sakchin in Vedanta tradition. So this can be done like this. But for Hegel, when the spirit becomes the unifying agency, then it becomes more substantive and its activities are reflected into every part of the development of the entities around us, the world. Now, in the Upanishads, the way the notion of absolute has been conceived is something which is neither of Cartesian type and also not of Spinozistic type. Yeah. So, and because Shankara, for instance, he subordinated the world and even God also to the notion of self, because self is very elusive, very elevated notion in Shankara's philosophy. So it's not like Descartes that self is dependent on God, or Shankara, Hegel also has made it the same way kind of a thing. But Shankara has, he thought that self is at the center of everything. And God and the world, they revolve around it. Shankara was a philosopher of one thought, and this is true of even most of the Vedantis, like Ramanuja also has the kind of a thing, and some others too. So it can bring, if I can, this is what we had about in Heidegger and Kant also. But Shankara is a philosopher of one thought in the sense of being a Brahmavadi kind of a thing. That important thing is there. The 5 Mahavakyas, which are there in the Upanishads, that becomes the guiding principles of the notion of consciousness in the Advaita Vedanta tradition. So there's no point of elaborating those 5 Mahavakyas. Those are very well known among the audience, and also I'm running out of time. So I'll just take another 5-6 minutes so that it can be open for discussion. Our discussion will be taking place after that, isn't it? So, all right.
Yeah, 5 minutes, so, and then we'll discuss.
Okay. Yeah. So Shankara, these 5 Mahavakyas. And then there is a wonderful analysis of the concept of mind, which is there. And in the Shiva Sankalpa Sukta, that is chapter 34 of Shukla Yajurveda, and 6th mantra of the Shukla Yajurveda, 34. So there, the concept of mind has been elaborated in a very excellent manner. And I think this area should be explored in a more substantive manner, the way that because I've been also been practicing TM for many, many years. So my experience is also there about TM. But perhaps the mind aspect, which they try to understand in terms of neurobiological issues, but some of the other issues which are there in the mind can be explored with the help of Shiva Sankalpa Sukta. And some of the points which are there, like mind is the source, controller, and regulator of internal perception of pleasure, pain, desire, emotion, patience, fear, satisfaction, doubt, well-being, and the list goes on, kind of a thing. So internal experience of all these things, only mind can help us to understand it. Second thing is that in addition to organic food, we also need food from the mind, speech, and knowledge. That how it comes from the mind alone. Speech, knowledge, and kind of care, concern, which is there, which comes with the mind. Then mind is the charioteer, and senses are like the horses. This is a kind of metaphorical expression we find in Plato and also in the Upanishads. But something which was very stimulating about this articulation is that one of the features, the fourth feature is that mind is near, mind is far off. So in fact, I was trying to understand in what sense does it mean that there are, that mind is near. Then I found that perhaps intelligence is something which can help us. So an intelligent mind can understand the things very fast, whereas a dull mind will take a lot of time to understand. So intelligence and dullness play very important role into it. So then if mind can understand it very quickly, then things are very near. And if the mind takes a lot of time, that means things are far off. In fact, things are as they are. It's only the capability that matters a lot. So mind is all the time awake, and it is the source of all illumination. That mind never sleeps. This kind of a thinking is there. That's why, even in the Turiya state or deep sleep state, mind gets that expression. It is there. But one can analyze it whether there is a contradiction in it, that at the deep sleep, Sushupti stage, mind is also sleeping, or mind is still awake there. Or maybe it is purely awake without any awareness of the objects, so kind of a thing. So, but this can be investigated, and more work is needed to be done. And the issues concerning harmony, faith, unifying capabilities, they all come in the mind. Finally, the Rishi, in fact, he praised the mind also, saying that mind is such a wonderful thing. May that mind help us to live in peace and harmony. The prayer is devoted to the notion of mind also. So this kind of issue is something which is there. And of course, after that, Sat Chit Anand issues are there. In the Tattva Viveka kind of things are there. So what does the Sat Chit and Ananda means? I'll just skip this kind of a thing. And the three stages of consciousness, there is three states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and the deep sleep. And Turiya state, where language even cannot penetrate. This also is something which needs to be, which has already been discussed also in the earlier paper. And one thing which is, I would like to place very briefly about it, that there are some philosophers, both in the East and also in the West. I know my successor, Professor Prasad, will be taking a Buddhistic approach, and he will definitely try to demolish these ideas. And it's good that such challenges come up in a substance. That also a scholar like Professor H.S. Prasad. So one has to think of it. Even in the West also, there have been various philosophers who have tried to say that, look, self is something which we cannot catch. We can catch pleasure and pain, love and hatred, heat and cold, but we cannot catch the self the way Descartes had tried to catch it in terms of cogito, knowing, feeling, willing, loving, judging, hating, etc. And he said that, look, we cannot catch the substance of it. This was the argument which Hume had given, and later on it was supported by many other philosophers like the positivists. They also had proposed this kind of a thing. Even Immanuel Kant also, in the Pure Reason, he says that you cannot apply any of the categories like substance, simplicity, and in being in relation to another object to the notion of consciousness. So to that extent, he was trying to say that epistemic means are not capable enough. But Hegel has tried to overcome this kind of a problem. And finally, what is the actual thing that the notion of consciousness as absolute, can it be really defended or not? I have something like this to talk about it, that the search for the absolute, is it desirable or not? You are in any position, can you try to ignore it? So I think it is desirable, at every level, and in a way, it is indispensable for philosophers to look into this problem and try to either give a positive answer or try to repudiate it. Then, how are we going to formulate the abstract ideas or the universals if we do not accommodate the notion of absolute into it? That is the universal of all the universals. That absolute notion has to come up. The Greek universals are there. The Enlightenment universals are there. In India also, there are so many universals which are there. But can it be done without the notion of the absolute? So I feel that they all require it. Then what could be the cultural response to the notion of, what is transcendent? Which is not confined to the temporality of the phenomenon. And there again, we require the notion of absolute only to develop it. In the Upanishads and also in most of the traditions in the West also, we find that they posited the concept of self to give an answer to the queries related to the notion of absolute. And this is something which is beyond space and time and beyond all kinds of antakarana. Yoga is another tradition which justifies it, and Bhagavad Gita is also having this kind of a conception. And at the end, I would again like to thank Professor Nataraju and his team, especially Dr. Monu Chakravarti, for inviting me. And yesterday, actually, I just could not manage it. I was so, everything went, in such a way that went beyond under control. So anyway, it was very nice that I could give some ideas about the notion of absolute. And you may please open it for question and answer, or I can wait for Professor Prasad's presentation and then the question and answer, the way you decide. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor. As always, it's pleasure listening to you all the time. It's such a kaleidoscopic knowledge. I mean, both the worlds are covered. And, it was more like a valedictory talk for our seminar. It covered so many aspects of it. And thank you so much. There are a couple of hands raised. We will go to them. And before that, I wish Europeans, never give Asian thinking their due, is one idea. How do you respond to it, Professor? Even in the case of Wittgenstein also, we have clear evidence that every weekend he was reading Tagore's translation of the Upanishads, etc. at his home. And now you brought up so many things that how the German intelligentsia was, definitely, the Persian translations of the Upanishads and Gita, further translated might be into different languages. But never there was any instance of they citing that, look, we derived this, there was no intellectual property right for them, etc.
Yeah, that is of course there. In fact, in 1995, when the World Conference was held at Harvard University, Boston, so that time Professor D.P. Chattopadhyay and others, they are all gone there. And they found that Indian philosophy is listed into some kind of, South Asian theology, not philosophy as such. So there was a protest. They had raised it for the first time that look, this is also philosophy and it's darshana. Darshana means seeing and showing. Both the aspects are there. You can see it and you can see it with pramanas and you can show it with the pramanas. Seeing and showing elements are there. And these are the two elements even in philosophy also. That you can see it, you can show it to the people around us. And then as a foundational subject, so they try to recognize it. And for the last 2 decades, I've been also traveling abroad and looking at various discourses on it. I found that there is substantive change now, that there is U-turn. We are now trying to understand what exactly is Indian philosophy and in what way they can contribute. Particularly after the collapse of socialism in the late 80s, after which People's Republic of China just managed to escape, and globalization also started in the early 90s in a substantive manner. That gave us ample opportunity to interact with the intellectual of the world. And now there are various places, various institutes which are trying to propagate Indian philosophy in a very substantive manner. In the UMass, you find that the Center for Indic Studies is there. They are organizing, and in the Hawaii University also they have done it. And in the journals and all that, they are bringing East and West kind of studies very substantially there. And the Radhakrishnan, in fact, had opened up that issue, but he was trying to look at it from the Western perspective. And some of the people like N.K. Devaraj, he was a professor in Lucknow University, and he has written a book on Indian philosophy. I'm forgetting the exact title of the book. I had read it long back. So if you read that book on Indian philosophy, it's basically a book on how Western philosophy is taught in Indian universities. Nothing doing with Indian philosophy as such. So how the same thing was done by Margaret Chatterjee also. So they were all having, because they have to get fellowship, they have to recognize that thing. Later on, they found that, if somebody comes from abroad, they will definitely like to know about Indian philosophy. Vedanta was opposed there for quite some time. And then after Dalai Lama got the Nobel Prize, then Buddhism became very popular now. Buddhism has taken up that, say, Prasad will be very happy to know about it. For the last 15, 16 years, it has been playing very important role. At least in the Humboldt and at the ANA also, they've introduced Buddhistic thinking and ideas, conferences and everything they are doing. University of Berlin is also doing it. So there is definitely a kind of, looking at India, and there are many Western scholars also who are engaged into it. And they are trying to learn Sanskrit and then trying to do philosophy. So please, future is very bright, and with your effort of quest for consciousness, East and West, this is another aspect of it, exploring it. And I can see the evening program is full of such events. Yeah, today I'll be here throughout the day, and I'll see that how it has been going on. So
Dr. Milan has something to say. Professor Milan, Dr. Milan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Nataraja, and I was really illuminated by Professor R.P. Singh's very important and very wide and comprehensive picture that he has given. But I have only two things. So first is, I will just respond to Professor Nataraja's question. This issue I have been observing for so many years. And what I have found is that the entire issue, why Western philosophers have so far kept ignoring Indian, all those articulations we have, and they have no access, or even if they know through German and French translations, they have ignored it. And then I found the main reason is politics. According to my research, which I have been working since 2019, I call it civilizational arguments. Because no, the two model of civilization, Western and Indian or Oriental civilization, they are completely opposite. Our civilization is inclusive, comprehensive, accommodative, and it is non-dual. Just now, Professor has brought out so well. And Western is completely Eurocentric, and then it is based on the Western people, Western race as a chosen race. All those things are there. So unless we see these two conflicting civilizational framework, and then the tragedy is the present 21st century, the globalization, right up to this present century, the world is governed, run by all these praxis, dynamic praxis, political economy, culture, everything is actually started from the West. This creates a problem. And everything is run, including modern education system, everything is based on Western civilizational model. Now, since that is going on, our life is controlled by them. There are no takers. And Western people are ignoring Indian philosophy because it goes against, it runs counter to their worldview. So unless this is understood, I don't see any point in going into the details and trying to figure out how Western philosophy, Indian philosophy can have a dialogue. There is no dialogue. There cannot be any room for dialogue, meaningful dialogue. Until now, they have not done anything. And Russia has started, very recently Russia has started. Russia and French and German, they have some favor. They have some favor to Indian worldview, Indian philosophical thing. I still remember I read in one book, Humboldt and Hegel had a long argument, public debate, because Hegel said that Indian civilization is in its infancy, and Western civilization has reached its adulthood, adult life in the state of maturity. Now, Humboldt had reacted to Hegel, and at the end, according to another article I have read, Hegel had to apologize. Humboldt told Hegel that, look, you don't know Sanskrit. Because Humboldt knew Chinese, Myanmarese language, and Sanskrit at that time, Humboldt. So now this civilizational conflict between West and East should be first settled. Before that is done, I don't think there can be any more meaningful kind of dialogue, because the world is still run by their ideas. That's why I'm a little against this neoliberal capitalist kind of thing. This cannot be understood without individualism. There is no individualism, there is no capitalism. There is no capitalism, then the entire world, global praxis will completely stop. This they don't want, because it's something to do with power. Knowledge is power. Philosophy, I found, it came along with modern Western, education, Occidental education. So now, where is our Indian ancient education system? It is nowhere, it has gone. It is completely historically stopped. During the historical period when the aliens invaded India, it was completely stopped. So classical period is over. Today, I don't even want to speak about in terms of the contemporary Indian philosophers. Contemporary Indian philosophy is lost. It's completely gone because they're not speaking about anything substantial about original Indian civilization kind of thing. Everything is spoken in the Western medium, Western epistemic framework, Western standard. That is the first thing we have to stop. So we have to focus on all those classical Indian methodological kind of thing. First, we have to bring it out, and our worldview has to be focused, and it should be brought out properly. So that is the first thing. Second one, and it is to Professor R.P. Singh, and during towards the end part of the thing, you did mention to spoke about Heidegger. I really appreciate that you're bringing in Heidegger here, because I found some affinity between Heidegger and the Indian, especially Shankara's worldviews, Botter, non-dual kind of thing, because Heidegger doesn't speak about subject and object dichotomy. But one thing I was a little perturbed is that Heidegger was not speaking about consciousness. He talked about interpretive understanding. He only talked about the seeing of Dasein, that the logos as letting the self manifest from itself in itself, be seen by the seeing of Dasein and Dasein's interpretive understanding and all those hermeneutical kind of circle he had developed ontology as making explicit of what is implicit. And in that way, I am also still struggling, how to bring in consciousness into the framework of Heidegger. But Heidegger avoided. There is what called avoidance in his being in time. Avoidance is a word, German word I forgot. He avoided subject and object in consciousness. Instead of that, as you have rightly put, being. Being in general has been brought into the picture. So that's the whole point.
Yeah, let the professor respond. Yeah, very brief comment, sir. Yeah, because you have two more questions in queue. Yeah.
Yeah, I broadly agree with most of the things, except two issues which I would like to clarify. One, that contemporary philosophy, you said that it is gone, but I think it has its relevance, because if you look at Sri Aurobindo, for instance, so 1918, William Archer's lectures on Is India Civilized and other such issues, and he has raised various issues against Indian philosophy, culture, and logic, physics, sciences, and everything else. And Sri Aurobindo has written articles on it, which was later on published in the book form also, posthumously in 1952, in Foundations of Indian Culture. So that way he has tried to repudiate all the charges labeled by William Archer on India, on Indian philosophy, cultures, Indian civilization, Indian physics, mathematics, language also, because he thought that India is a barbarian kind of a thing. So that way it remains very important one. And second thing is about the phenomenological hermeneutics, which is there in Heidegger. Of course, I agree with you, but you must be recalling that from 1935 to 1945, almost 10 years, Heidegger was constantly writing on Hölderlin. Hölderlin was the one who was made philosopher. He was basically a poet. And Heidegger's reflections on it, which had got very little to do with hermeneutics and phenomenology, it was a kind of conscious reflection on the poems of Hölderlin. There we find its example. And the other thing is that in Search for Being, Sein, when Heidegger goes to the pre-Socratic philosophers, and there also he fails to grasp the being, and he himself becomes a poet, he starts writing the poems. There we find that his consciousness kind of a phenomenon emerges in a creative manner. And of course the hermeneutic and other aspects are there. Thank you very much. Civilizational issue is very big, and maybe if there is some opportunity, Professor Nataraju, you can organize some such debate on it. Civilizational issues in India, that also very passionate. But anyway, thank you very much.
Anindyo, one-line question. Anindyo, just one question. Anindyo is our MA student. Yeah, one-line question.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. It was a session of knowledgeable to hear from you, sir. But I wanted to ask, or I have a query that do we have some process to reach that absolute consciousness? I wanted to know that, sir. The process or the path? Process or path?
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
All the three such ways to go towards it, which has been methodologically accepted by most of the philosophers. One is the psychological way of doing it, looking into the antakarana, what goes on into your own mind. The other is the cosmological approach, which is there both in the Upanishads and the Vedas also, and in the West also we have it. And the third is the theological way of doing it. So, and we can take all the three, or we can choose one of them. So it's up to the people. and Anindya, you can write to me, and then I'll send you some materials on this matter so that you can elaborate, because you are a young student, so that will be good enough.
I'll give you email that Anindya, you talk to me in the
Okay, sir.
department. It's good to interact with such professors. That's a good beginning. I mean, you
Yes,
know,
sir.
I'll give you the mail, write to professor and get the material. You know, that's good. That's good. Arup, Dr.
Okay, sir.
Arup,
Thank you, sir.
Arup,
Thank
one
you,
line
sir.
comment, Dr. Arup, one line, because we are running late by 10 minutes. Please.
Thank you, Professor Singh sir. Once again, it has been really fascinating to listening to you, covering both the perspectives, Indian and the Western. Sir, I would just like to know, I mean, just in brief comment from you, that where these philosophers meet on the nature of consciousness.
Yeah. So thank you, Arup. Nice to see you. And in fact, meeting point will be, you know, as we think about it, the conceptual at the conceptual scale. So if they are monists, they can meet, they can extend the ideas, like Hegelian monism and Shankara's monism can be compared and contrasted. Witness self, I think, level consciousness in Kant and the witness consciousness in Hegel in Vedanta tradition, that could be an indication of it. So there are certain key indicators of it, and that will be a meeting point so far as the concepts are there. And it's also a fact because we see the world because we have the concepts. Otherwise, what the world is like, we don't know. We know it because we have the concept. So concepts are the, you know, seeing and showing aspect of it. And similarly, the case with you know, even in the Sankhya tradition and the dualism of Descartes and John Locke also, because they also are the dualistic. There is dualistic elements even in Kant also. So it has to be addressed, you know, by looking at the similarities and the, you know, differences between them. So, but the logical sequence through which they have arrived at this kind of finding, that could be, you know, surprisingly very different. Hegel's dialectics and Kant and Shankar's Advaya dialectic are substantially different ones. So means may differ, but goal may be the same kind of a thing. So
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a deliberation. And still there are questions, but okay, we'll continue through the day. Dr. Munmoon, you have introduction for the next speaker, Professor Harishankar
Yes.
Prasad.
Professor already, I think, has joined.
Yeah,
Professor Harishankar Prasad, are you there?
he's very much. He's there for the last.
Yeah, good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon. And on behalf of the center, I welcome you to this international conference on the quest for consciousness. I'd like to take the opportunity to introduce Professor Harishankar Prasad has now retired from the Department of Philosophy, University of Delhi after serving it for 35 years. He has studied at Banaras Hindu University and Australian National University. He joined the University of Delhi as a faculty member, headed the Department of Philosophy, also served as Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Executive Council member. He has published, edited, and seven books, and his main work is The Centrality of Ethics in Buddhism. That has been appreciated internationally. Besides, he has published more than 40 research articles in national and international journals and anthologies. At present, his three projects are near completion. One, Sailing Against the Current, the Buddha, Buddhism, and Methodology. Two, Philosophy of Time, East and West. And third, The Indian Theories of Consciousness. So, sir, today is making presentation on the problematic mind, meditation, the deep structure of consciousness, a Buddhistic perspective. I welcome you, sir. Hearty welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Namaste to all of you. It's a great opportunity to attend this conference. I have a problem that every time Professor R.P. Singh speaks and I am the next one. And that creates lots of problem for me. Every time he presents excellent lecture and then I have the difficulty. But anyway, he is my friend. He is my younger brother. No problem. So within 1 hour, I'm not sure whether I can cover all the points, but at the same time, I shall discuss a few things which will perhaps strike you and that because the article is quite big, maybe 24 pages, and it has taken many months and months to write this one, but still it is not published. You see, philosophy starts with some kind of striking experience, and the same happened with Siddhartha. And then Siddhartha started, and he fixed his project. He wanted to solve some problem, and that is that dukh and dukh nivriti. Dukh and dukh nivriti. So Siddhartha starts with that, and then you'll find that he left his home and then he moved to Magad area. All these things, you know that. So to begin at the beginning, this is actually the starting point. There are few things which I would like to list rather, that we must remember that Buddhism is a process philosophy. And this process is very much in the nature itself. Now, every time I realize that those who speak on Buddhism, they don't explain the very title of Siddhartha himself, that is the Buddha, for example. So to speak on the word, the Buddha, is a very difficult task. So please, but what is Buddhism? Buddhism is rooted in the Buddha's wisdom. And all of us, we know that the source is the Buddha himself. And you know that in the very first discourse or desana, that is Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the most important realization was Paticca Samuppada, Pratitya Samutpada. And Pratitya Samutpada, and then he innovated a formula that is therapeutic formula, that is Four Noble Truths. And then you have in this, in the beginning itself, then you know that Seal, Satipatthana, Brahma Vihar, Paramita, Bodhisattva, etc., and Jhana, that is Dhyan formulation. See, the Buddha believed in the common humanity. And at one place in my book, I called the humanity the community of sufferer. That every human being belongs to a community of sufferer. Now the next point is, I shall go like this one, and then I shall read my article. The one thing is, so far as consciousness is concerned, that is the English term, and this consciousness is actually a product in Buddhism. There are four basic elements, and you know, four basic elements, that is the Mahabhut. And Mahabhut is that Agni, Jal, Prithvi, and Vayu. In the Upanishadic tradition also, in the Vedic and Upanishadic tradition also, but there are 5, including Akash. And these four basic elements, in the very nature, they interact with each other and consciousness is produced, that is created. It's very much there. You can say that it's very much there. It is underlying in this one. But that is the official position. Now there are three terms which are very important to know, and then there are more and more terms which actually talk about some or the other kind of consciousness. The three are very important: Man, Chit, and Vigyan. And then if you go further from Sutta literature to Abhidharma literature, in Pali literature, for example, there are two texts, Dhamma Sangini and Atthasalini, that is the commentary on that. There are so many modes of consciousness in some or the other way. Broadly speaking, they are not talking about, you see, the kind of consciousness which we have in the non-Buddhist literature. And then you have, for example, suppose 200 to 300, even more than that, there are different modes of consciousness. In terms, please always remember that it's a consciousness. But there are two terms which are very important, you must remember. And if you see in the very first verse of Dhammapada, there is a line, very popular line, Manopubangama Dhamma Manosetta Manomaya. Manopubangama means that the mind precedes the Dhamma, that is the plural, and that is the phenomena, actually. So the mind is there. Mind is, in a sense, it is very much the real, but it creates the phenomena. That is actually the idea. So the mind and the phenomena, or Chit and Chetasik, this is the duality. So mind is one, but at the same time, it is not one in the sense that, because it is fluxional. It is anityata, anatmata, you know, and it is fluxional. This is the process of philosophy. And in the process philosophy, it's just like the river that it keeps flowing. So this is that. The next one is that the Buddhists consider their program as a Sanatan. Sanatan word is used in that one. And Sanatan and Aryan. These two are very common, but different approaches are there. And then you see that there is a clash between Anatmavad and Atmavad. If I am keeping Charvak away, then you will find that all others are Anatmavad, Buddhists are Anatmavadi, and all others are Atmavadi. So you have to be very, very careful about knowing their different frameworks, you can say. So there is always a dialogue or clash between the Buddhists, although within Buddhism itself, but on Buddhism on the one side and non-Buddhist on the other side. So Buddhism is all alone and all others are on the other side, you can say. And that's why there is very strong, you can say, very sharp conflicts between the two groups, you can say. Now, I'm coming to few more things. So many things are there, but at the same time, in a Advaita Vedanta or any kind of Vedanta, they actually starts with Nasadiya Sukta actually. Nasadiya Sukta gives an idea that Brahman is sleeping in the sleeping mode, and then Brahman manifests himself or itself in the plurality. Now there is a question that when the Brahman is sleeping, then there is one kind of Advaita, and when the manifestation manifestation in plurality, that is a very different kind of Advait, for example. And that's why at that level that there is a problem. How to explain and how to understand the creation itself. So I'm not discussing that one. This kind of approach that is there actually in Asadi Association, everything is consciousness. But here everything is not conscious in that sense. There it's eternal, nitya, and in Buddhism it is unnityad because of the process of philosophy, and that is actually rooted this pratitya samutpad, the law of universal dependent arising. Different factors are there, and these different factors interact with each other. They are homogeneous, and then a result is there, and then the process keeps going, and there is some kind of unity in that. And entire Buddhism has this basic thing, and every Buddhist scholar, every Buddhist thinker or writer takes into consideration this kind of approach. That is, so in Dhammacakka, Pavattana Sutta, you know that you already, and I have already explained that Pratitya Samutpad or Paticca Samutpad is the starting point, and that is the wisdom actually, in the wisdom. But how to explain the continuity, because the continuity is there. And continuity gives you, as a common man, you think that it is very aesthetic. Lots of things are there. So keep in your mind, and then you try to understand Buddhism on the one hand and non-Buddhist on the other hand. Everything, I have never seen any scholar in the world who has in detail explained a very important, I should say that the most important sutta, and that is Arya Pariyesana Sutta. Arya Pariyesana Sutta, that is a kind of the Buddha's autobiographical details, which is ignored, and only Dhammacakka Pavattana Sutta is highlighted to start with. In Arya Pariyesana Sutta, when the monks, but it comes later. But so far as events are concerned, it comes first. So in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, the whole soteriological, not soteriological, but actually spiritual journey from Kapilavastu to the Magad, the whole things. And you can say it ends in the wisdom. Now, in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, he is describing his the whole journey, and at one point he faces, or at one point or throughout his journey, he faces so many modes of, or so many views, and they are also considered as the Dhamma. Dhamma in the plural, the Akarant, that is the plural, they dominate, and he used to face this one, and he has a great difficulty to challenge them, and lots of other things also happened in this one. So Arya Pariyesana Sutta, actually there is one word in this Arya Pariyesana Sutta which I caught it, and then I changed my presentation or understanding of Buddhism itself. Arya Pariyesana Sutta means that sailing against the current. Sailing against the current. This is actually the idea, and this is a very radical approach, a methodology, you see. And in the meantime, you can say, or that he had to develop his program or his doctrines on this line. And he had in his mind that everything is empirical, everything is pragmatic. At the same time, everything is teleological so far as the nature is concerned. So empirical grounding is very strong for the Buddhists. Now, so far as philosophy, religion, ethics, and soteriological, these 4 points are concerned, then it's very difficult to manage all these 4 areas. But anyway, this is a point which I am raising here. And so in Arya Pariyesana, what is Arya Pariyesana Sutta? The Arya Pariyesana Sutta is that you are going against the current. This is literally, that is called Patisotagami. Patisotagami, the methodology or the journey of the Buddha's thought. Now, if you, and please remember in the very beginning that Dukh and Dukh Nivritti was his actually the project actually. Dukh is there, existential predicament, no doubt, but Dukh Nivritti, how to overcome the Dukh Nivritti. So suppose that you are sitting in your room, in your house, and suddenly there is an accident or somebody in the neighborhood or in your own house has the heart attack, serious heart attack. Of course, you will be disturbed and you would like to take him or her to the hospital. But if you take, and you also have the car, you have your ambulance also, for example, everything is, all the facilities that are there. But when you come to the road, actually you have to go through the road, and in that case, you find that there is a very big, very crowded religious procession which occupies both sides of the road, both sides of the roads. Now, you will find that there are two events taking place. One is the procession on both sides, they are occupying and they are moving towards one destination. And here the patient you have, and there is a question of life. Now, you simply don't succeed and the patient dies. Now, this is his Patisotagami, that I'm going against all these dogmatic things. Which one is more important than, which one is more important for X or Y in this one? Let me take another parable, and that is parable of arrow. That a person is walking through a jungle, somebody is in the forest to hit deer, but that arrow misses the deer and it hits the passerby. Now, the question is that nobody helps, nobody comes forward to help the victim. But in that case, so many people come forward, even the doctor comes forward, and the victim is lying on the ground and the arrow is in his chest. But the doctor is trying to remove that arrow, but the person who is struck by the arrow, he asks everybody not to touch that arrow. And he asks them first to answer his question, who has struck this one? What was his gotra? And what is the price? And such a beautiful arrow, all sorts of questions. Then Buddha says that, oh, he does not have the priority to save his own life. And that is actually the striking experience, although this is some kind of analogy, probably it's a metaphor to explain. This is the one thing. Another thing is that when in the Arya Pariyesana Sutta, when he got wisdom, awakening, wisdom of the reality, Yatha Bhut Yad Dassan, that is actually the that is the phrase, a Pali phrase. And in that one, actually, what happens that he wanted, when he got this one, but whatever realization he had, he saw that it goes against the existing dogmatic belief system, and he is all alone. So he wanted to share with his teacher, erstwhile teachers, Alar Kalam and Uttakarama Putta, and then he wanted to talk. They had deserted him, but then he came to know that both of them had already died. So he decided not to teach anybody, because not to teach anybody, Why? Because nobody will understand his realization. And if he does not teach the people about his own Dhamma, then the Lok Sangraha will also be left out. Now, in that case, what happened, that he wanted to liberate the entire humanity. This was his task, very ambitious task. And in that case, what happened, he decided not to preach this one. But suddenly he came to, he was actually, there was some kind of feeling later on that he was sitting near a pond, and this pond was full of all those lotus flowers, etc. So he was very in a meditative mood, and he was very sad also. But suddenly when he saw a lotus flower, it struck him. This experience was wonderful, and then he struck. And then he started thinking about this lotus temple, that there is a lotus temple is above the surface of the water, okay? And the leaf is on the surface of the water, and its roots are in the mud, actually, inside the water, deep inside the water, and that is the mud, actually. And then he realized that actually there is a flower on top of the water, you see, on the top of the water. And then but its roots are in the mud. So he said that at different levels of growth, actually, or the development of you can say the lotus flower, for example. And then he said that no, my ambition is that it was earlier, or that I have to eliminate the suffering of the entire humanity, but this is not possible. And not possible, this means that it is just like the lotus, the growth or the development of the lotus flower, for example. In the beginning, it is in the mud, in the middle, etc., etc. That is also not the growth beyond a certain limit, etc. So the humanity is like this one. Humanity is like this one. And then he said that, no, I should not worry about the entire humanity, but at least as much as possible. For the reason that every human being has a different form of attitude, or a different constitution, very different constitution, different levels of awareness, different levels of thinking, etc., all these things. And then he decided to preach. And then he moved to Sarnath area, and then the five disciples, they were co-meditationists, and then there he shared with all those five co-meditationists, and then they became the Buddha's disciple person. So this is their study. So Arya Pariyeshan Sutta is such an important thing, and elsewhere. And that's why I use this one, this Patisotagami, throughout Buddhism, even today, throughout Buddhism, in every area, on every issue, this application is there. This application as a methodology is being used. The only thing is that not going through the Arya Pariyeshan Sutta, we are not aware of the importance of going against the current, for example. So current example, for example, suppose there are 1,000 boats floating in the water along the current, actually. So a boatman does not have to work anything. He is so, you can say, relaxed. But the one who is going against the stream, then every moment, every moment, he or she has to be very careful, very difficult. So this is the background, and you see. Another thing is that later on you will find in the tradition, so far as consciousness is concerned, if you start from the Sutta literature and then the Abhidhamma or Abhidharma later on, where from Theravada, Pali Theravada to, you can say that Abhidhamma, where the systematization is very much there and also in detail. But the consciousness is not an independent, And so far the mind is concerned, mind is the most problematic, because this is very creative and very problematic. So I am reading some of my some important passages I am reading. Now, there are a few more things I think that you will I have elsewhere. Then there is a striking it, because in his spiritual journey or in spiritual life, lots of questions were raised by people, because in those days all of them were very dogmatic. Now, at one point in time, they asked the Buddha, why are you spoiling the society? That there is no, by simply teaching that there is no soul or there is no God, etc. Why are you? Then, if you want to summarize your desana or discourse, all sorts of things you have, in 2 words, you explain, or you just give in 2 words, you summarize your thinking in 2 words. Then he said that, with Vidya and Acharan. So he focused on 2. And later on, in another place, he was asked that, why are you God? Are you God? Then he said that, no. Are you Asur? Then he said, are you this? No. Are you this? No, no. And then ultimately, the questioner asked, but you must be a human being. He said that, no, I'm not a Manushya. Then what you are? He said that, I'm the Buddha. This was the answer. Now, in this one, Dukkha and Dukkha Nirodha, but the focus was always, is not moving. Now, I have a few points in 1 line or 2, and another one in 5 or 6 lines, because I am summarizing my lecture, because I have very little time. 1 hour is not enough, but at the same time to make a point in this lecture. Just as in the great ocean, Buddha said, at one people say that, what kind of lecture you are giving? He said that, in the same, he said that Buddha strives for the cessation of predicament, Dukkha Nirodha, for himself as well as the entire humanity. This is clear. In the same spirit, in the Majjhima Nikaya, he says, as of earlier, as of now, I preach the fact of suffering and cessation. Means that throughout his life, he has only one focus actually. And that focus is that the fact of suffering, and that fact of suffering, and then it's a cessation. But how to do all this? This is how to overcome the suffering, etc. And then the next one is, next point is that many disciples used to visit him, and they used to ask for the technique or some kind of blessings to liberate, to get liberation, moksha, etc. Then Buddha used to say, listen to me. I am Margadata. I can show you the path, not Mokshadata. I am not the giver, you can say that. I am not the liberator. You have to do that. I can show you the path. Because in those days, and even today, so many people claim that if you take this, and then you will be liberated, or my blessings will liberate you. But this kind of statements, or this kind of perspective, Buddha did not have this kind of perspective. All this. Another thing is that at one place, when there are so many charges that you are creating a war against the society, he said that I am not against the society. I am not at war. The world is at war with me. And the example is that I am taking the patient to the hospital, but I am not allowed to And the people are so insensitive. They have the insensitive because that is also a mode of, you can say, consciousness, you can say that. So this kind of, so this is that why are they so strong? Because they, even today, it happens even today, actually today. And simply because everybody is not developed, but how to develop, he has already given a formula for this, which I shall discuss a little later. And then he says that you do yourself for yourself. And then he says that one can see, one can judge. You can do that. Verify the truthfulness of my practical teachings here itself, and that is called technically ehipasik. To me, you can try here yourself. You can try, because you have to do that. I can't do, nobody can help you. Nobody can, even God cannot help you. God cannot, nobody else, no other teacher can help you except that he or she will show you the path of liberation. One is one's own refuse, that is called attahi attano natho, usually. Meaning every human being is responsible, because everything is dependent on the mind and the consciousness. Actually, there are different modes and there are different ways. It's not possible to, and I'm not competent to speak on consciousness or different varieties or different contexts and whatnot. So one is one's own refuse, attahi attano natho, meaning every human being is responsible for his own destiny as per the karma phal, because the karma phal was introduced the first time. First time he introduced the concept. And within that karma phal, there is a chetana, the intention that if whatever is something you are doing, but you are not responsible. Unintentionally it happens, so you will not be affected for that. You will not be responsible for that as well. So karma phal magician, because nobody will help him in this matter. In the same way, the Buddha tells his most favorite attendant, Ananda, in the Maha Parinibbana Sutta, that only his dhamma will take care of everybody. Only his dhamma. I mean, dhamma means whatever the realization, etc., all sorts of and ethical, moral perfection, and all sorts of things. Will take care of everybody after his demise. So he, Ananda, understanding Ananda, need not worry for future. Therefore, Ananda dwell making themselves, making yourself, your island, your support. Making yourself, not anyone else, you refuse. Making the Dhamma your island, that is the support. The Dhamma you also refuse. Nothing else you refuse. Needless to say, there are many more such significant statements delivered by the Buddha for our understanding and practice. Now I'm coming to the article. I'm reading this one now. The title is that the problematic mind, meditation and the deep structure of consciousness. I'm reading the abstract because I have little time, and then I have some more important passages, which I shall try to manage within another half an hour. Mind, that is man, meditation, jhana, absorption, bhavana, mental development, and consciousness, chitta chaitasic, are the three most foundational terms and concepts which are not only highly complex, but also puzzling, mysterious, and unfathomable, not only for the sensory and intellectual faculties, but also for internal faculty to grasp their natures and functions, because they belong to the inner world actually. This is the difficulty. Buddha is not actually blaming the society, the external world. It is the internal world actually, utterly contrary to the external physical world. And in the physical world and in the inner world. So inner world they are trying, each Buddhist school of thought is focusing on the inner world, for example, in some or the other way. There are some realists also, critical realists also, who take into consideration for actually to be the part of the life, etc. And of course, mind and body, etc. All these things are there. They're not isolated. So inner world utterly contrary to the external world, like the physical world. Among these, the mind is problematic because of its imperfect psychophysical cognitive constitution. It's very different. This is the problem. The constitution itself is problematic. Human being is not wrong. I mean, human being has not asked for his or her birth of his or her own choice. There is no choice. We are given actually, but you are giving, and then you are like this or that. So this kind of the constitution, very much constitution is the problematic actually. And then this is the given one. And that's why this kind of evolution by the nature, Buddha did not have any control. Now he says that this, since this life is there, this problem is there, this nature is also problematic. So we have to manage ourselves actually. And it is here that Buddhism starts actually. So evolution by the nature, and then that evolution, whatever the merit is there in the nature, that is actually goes to the devolution actually. And then Buddha's evolution starts. Because we destroy the world. And we destroy the world because of the mind and consciousness, mind or consciousness, chit or chetasik, etc. actually. There. And then I have to actually create, go for a kind of evolution actually. And that evolution is possible only through Vidya and Acharan actually. So consciousness is there. Consciousness or mind or whatever, different names are there. And you will find that, just I remember here, in the Yogacara actually, there are 8 modes of Vijnanas. There are 8 modes of Vijnanas. And those Vijnanas, you have 5 kinds of Pravritti Vijnan. You have 2 kinds of Manovigyan. One is Klishta Manas and one is the very passive Manovigyan. And then the last one is Alaya Vigyan, for example. A beautiful explanation. And then, so that is in the mind is, and this one, cognitive, which range from minor to essence. It's a problematic nature, may be dull, ignorant, and erroneous in cognition, emotive, and cognitive, which range from minor to extreme. Extreme. The problem can go to extreme. And you see the example of Zelensky and Putin. There are 2 persons and they are destroying the world. And there are so many such examples actually. This is this kind of mind, extreme. Maybe this very simple one, and the last is the extreme one. But conversely, it can also be sensitive and compassionate. You see the extreme of 2 kinds. Compassionate in the same range and a different degree, which you find in the Bodhisattva ethics, for example. His vows. Number 1 now, and the mind is actually problematic for multiple reasons. In the Buddhist process philosophy, it is fluxional, self-unifier, self-manifesting. It creates the phenomena out of itself and reifies them, conceives ideas and objectifies them in the external world, imbued with intentionality, forgetful of its own original status, under ignorance, possesses capacity to create ideal and imaginary world in both waking and dream. So Buddhism, we will say that the entire imagination, they are speculative, and that's why the Buddha and Buddhists did not like the speculative metaphysics, for example. There's so much imagination. What about the practical part? What about the empirical? अगर दर्द यहाँ हुआ है, चोट यहाँ लगी है, बीमारी यहाँ हुई है, तो चिकित्सा भी यही होना चाहिए. So in this world itself, the problem is in this world, solution also should be in this world. So this way, and that's why it is Vaisajya Guru. He is considered to be the Vaisajya Guru, therapeutic doctor, you can say, the medical doctor formula. And Four Noble Truth is the formula line. This one. So possess capacity to create ideal and imaginary world in both waking and dream states, deposits within itself dispositions, sanskar. And that is that any action you perform, there is a sanskar. And you cannot eliminate actually. You cannot. For example, I'm giving lecture here, or you are hearing and participating, I can never forget if I'm a normal person. So this is sanskar, etc. So you have to get there which is actually, it's a very complicated psychological study, and I'm not an expert, but at the same time, I say that this is very important for unconscious or subconscious and whatnot. Number two, on the other, it is self-aware, self-reflexive, self-reflective, self-knowing, self-correcting, self-planning, spiritually self-developing, self-purifying, and so on. So only the self, the agent, is responsible to do all this. Means that your consciousness, your mind, or your thinking and whatnot, all these things are in you, and you are responsible. You are the patient and you are the doctor. You are the patient, you are the sufferer because of your own action. You are actually actually treat yourself, then that is your way of doing the things, and nobody else will. The doctor can prescribe the medicine, but the doctor cannot eat the medicine actually. It plans meditational techniques, and that's why how to overcome. And then the methodology, then and in my lecture, that is a problematic mind and meditation and the deep structure of consciousness. So on the other hand, all these things, it plans a meditational technique for cleansing its own defilement. All these things are there, and I'm not reading it. Now let me give you an example, which has been liked by many scholars, that actually mind is like a kitchen. What happens in the kitchen? That you have all sorts of things. You have utensils, you have the gas, you have ingredients coming from different fields, etc., through the grocery shop, and then you have. But at the same time, there must be a cook also, a good cook also. A cook can cook food with a very bad taste, etc., and otherwise. But here, this analogy, this metaphor I'm using, because it is the mind actually, mind is awesome, but mind, all ingredients are mind itself. Mind is the element, mind is the grocery, mind is the gas, mind is the utensils, and mind is the cook. So mind is the cook actually. So the mind, this is the mind is all elements actually. So mind is there, the chit is there, or using money is there, and then the dhammas are there actually. And this is very prominent. If one is ignorant, then ignorant keeps one suffering. So this point. Now I'm moving to this kind of which I studied, that the Dhyan formula. At the time of the Buddha, there was no clear formula. It was the Buddha who first time you had the Dhyan formula. What is the Dhyan? The Dhyan is actually you have to withdraw yourself from the outer world and then move to the inner world. That is actually the first starting point. And if you can manage, suppose I'm seeing something, so I'm very attached to that thing. So if I close my eyes and I'm not seeing the object, so that the relation is broken. But this is not true. At least the image of that object is thinking. It's a sanskara you have got. All these are still alive and they are stronger. you cannot do. And that is called from outer to the inner, and that is called vitarka. That is the vitarka. That still you have not detached yourself. And that's why the vitarka is actually vitak. Vitak or vitarka in Sanskrit, that is that images are there. So now once you close the eyes, now you are coming to the image which is not ontological, which is not metaphysical actually. It has no physical reality, but at the same time as an idea, a form of mind or form or a phenomena that is there, and that is very strong. So you have to take another step actually, that is called vichar, the critical analysis of that image. And you have to show that there is no ontological status. This is just empty. So this kind of pragya, you, for example, will create shunyata, for example. But once a shunyata is created, then your detachment is there. Detachment is also developed, for example. And then you have sukha, etc., piti and sukha and ekagrata, etc. But that itself is not. But this is the first time that the Buddha formulated the dhyan or dhyan formula, which develops into 9 stages. Now the next one, the last one is that forgive me, please, because I'm very fast. Sorry, it's very difficult to manage because I have already written, but at the same time, it's not so simple for me to wind up. Now, I have in this section, I have discussed the Chit, Manas, and Vijnana. So that one is, I'm skipping that one. And the last one is that Bhavanga Chit. Bhavanga Chit is very important. That is very much deep structure of consciousness. Now, deep structure of consciousness, I'm reading 1.5 pages, for example, 2 pages, less than 2 pages, I think 1.5. Bhavanga Chit, what is Bhavanga Chit? Bhavanga Chit is that specific mode of consciousness which is the latently flowing bedrock. For example, take an example of river. What happens in the river? River actually is purest. Ganga Nadi, for example, is the purest when it comes out of the mountain. It's pure. But once it lands on the earth, then it starts polluting itself. Lots of, you can say, industrial waste or other kinds of flow, etc., all sorts of things. So Ganga maili ho jati hai, Ganga ki maili ho jati hai. It is this kind of things. Its consciousness is like this one. Then in its purity. Now that is the river bed actually. Now that river bed actually sustains the flowing river. But this river bed becomes problematic at a stage when actually it is not free to choose its path actually, not. So it is directed by घड़ियाल होगा, मछली होगी, कीड़े, मकोड़े, गंदगी, स्नान, all sorts of these things are there. All sorts of these things are there. And this river model, which is my model, kitchen model, I'm very happy to understand with the metaphors, some kind of metaphor. Even Buddha used to use metaphors, so many kinds of metaphors. But let me read this page. Bedrock of the conditioned continuity of the existence of a sentient being across the three segmented temporality. It is thus called Bhavanga Sota, as it is like a stream of river which carries all sorts of elements. In this sense, it is the underlying current powered by the karmic forces, which condition the structuring process of the appropriate nature of the existence of a new sentient being actually. So consciousness, whether you are in this life or later after birth, etc. So this is the explanation what the Buddhists have given. And I know time, 5 minutes only left for me. For this reason, it is a dynamic process without beginning and end as long as the samsaric life continues because of the consciousness factors like ignorance. This is the cognition, this is the factor actually, consciousness factor. And Kamma Vipaka, that is the Sankhar. The Bhavanga Chit is the possessor and the carrier of all past impressions of experiences and willful karma, which have the potentiality to shape the future life, good or bad. It is also the root cause of arising of the faculty of memory, to create a bridge between death and rebirth. Thus, it is a specific mode of consciousness which latently sustains the regular flow of a stream of consciousness from past to present to future existence and life. So I'm closing here, and a few things, for example, have maybe in 2 minutes. Then the Buddhists, for example, you see Buddhist like Madhyamik. Madhyamik is not actually, Madhyamik has a very different kind of approach. And the Madhyamik has that it is the Shunyavadi, but Shunyavadi, every Buddhist is a Shunyavadi. Every Buddhist is a Shunyavadi. Pudgal Shunyata or Dharma Shunyata, Atma Shunyata, and so on. All these things are there. So in this one actually, Sarva Drishti Shunyata. Now Sarva Drishti Shunyata or any Shunyata is very dangerous, very dangerous. Dangerous in the sense that it is actually mental creation, a kind of phenomena is there. So this one, that's why the emptiness has to be found, because this is not an ontological reality. It's not the reality actually. And that's why after creating a Chitta Shuddhi, the Chitta Shuddhi, when Prajna is there, then the Chitta Shuddhi there through meditational process, etc. And then you have the second part. The second part is that the universality of the ethics is created, and that is adopted by the Bodhisattvas. And at one place, so they have the, when you shift to the Mahayana, then that you have Prajna, Karuna, and what is the third one? I will, that is, but anyway, this one.
Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha, you say?
No, that is Brahma Vihara. I'm talking of Prajna and Karuna. Prajna, Karuna, and anyway, any Karuna. So there is in the beginning, everyone in the beginning, every thinker in the beginning has a purpose actually. And in the very beginning of in the very first chapter, in the very first chapter, the Chandrakirti's commentary, Chandrakirti writes, Karunaya Parabodhartham Shastra Pranayanam. कि दूसरे को अवेकन करने के लिए हम शास्त्र लिखते हैं. And on the other hand, because Nagarjuna or Chandrakirti, they don't accept the Pramana epistemology or logic, except for the conventional world. And later on, last line, what happens in the world? Yad yasya priyam. जिसको जो अच्छा लगता है, whatever one chooses, the choice. Yad yasya priyam tat tasya samachari. And one is actually the choice factor. It says my choice, my drishti. And if drishti I maintain, that drishti is the Dithi Rag. Nagarjuna said that your view, your philosophical view is actually attachment. The ideology is a perspective, ideology, and that is taken as the absolute truth. Absolute. And actually, what happened? This actual, Dithi Rag is converted into, because in the ideology, and that is the group actually. And the third one is, the last one is that it becomes an intoxicant. So ideology becomes a this, and that's why Sarva Drishti Shunyata. And that's why he ends in the some kind of non-difference between Sansara and Nirvana. I stop here. And thank you very much for giving me the time, and forgive me to speak very fast.
No, Professor. It was clear and very lucid. We could understand. And there are a couple of hands raised. I will quickly take questions, but keep it all brief. Both the questioners. Dr. Soumyakanti will go first, followed by Dr. Shipra. Soumyakanti, keep it brief.
Sir, please take my pranam. I am Dr. Soumyakanti Vishwas. So my question, as you have, you have of course tried to answer it in some way or the other in your concluding remarks, that for the Yogacara, the mind seems to be the last word, and as Ashwagosha seems to divide mind into an enlightened mind and a non-enlightened mind and so on. But in Madhyamika, this mind is treated as one of the modifications of unenlightened consciousness. Nagarjuna would not accept any kind of, categorization in the liberation context. So I would pray for your kind comment on that, sir. Thank you.
You see, this is all Buddhists are doing the same, but in different ways, actually, different ways. Please, may I see your picture so that we face each other?
Yes, sir.
You see,
yes, sir.
You see, there is a program. The program is that you are a farmer, for example. You are a farmer, you clean the field for sowing the seed, okay? So the cleansing the ground, actually, just like a farmer, you remove the grass, you remove all sorts of stones, etc., so that the field is ready for the creative purpose, actually. This is the actually. But at the same time, if you have, suppose your mind is clear, and that is the problem for Patanjali. He borrowed the Buddha's formula, for example. I'm telling you, he did not, he left his friendship with the Sankhya. This is a very big problem because the Sankhya. Anyway, and that one, that he talks of Nisvabhava. Nisvabhava. He is not worried about the nature, about the world, what is given. He is not, actually. But this one, the raga, dosha, and moha, actually. These are very important things. This is the starting point. Where is the starting point? Because you take the falsity as truth. So mind is at the center of Buddhism throughout, but in a different way. Because there is a development, methodology is there, terminology is there, and doctrines are there. So there it's a Nisvabhava, and then he leaves it there, and then he comes to the world. That here, if your mind is cleaned, then you are ready for the ethicization of your whole behavior. Mansa vacha karmana, you can say that. That is there. Now, so far Yogachara is there. Yogachara Vigyapti Matrata Siddhi. Vigyapti means the phenomena, actually. It is not consciousness. In the Vedantic sense, Vedantics are very happy. Okay, Buddhism is now has surrendered to them. Actually, this is not the case. Actually, I'm not criticizing him because this is not the time to criticize. And there it is that three Swabhav Nirdesh. One is Niswabhavta, that is attacked by the Yogacharyas with the three Swabhav. उन्होंने कहा कि एक नहीं, एक तो आप कहते हैं निस्वभावता नहीं है, हम कहते हैं तीन स्वभावता है. And then तीन स्वभावता is converted into three kinds of niswabhavta. So this is actually very different one. And the 8 kinds of Vijnanas. So you know that all these are phenomena actually. Then all Buddhists are very skeptic. They don't know, they know that this is not truth and they are going to destroy the truth. Very soteriological aspect. But once it is clear that your life is end, you become inactive. But at the same time, Bodhisattva doctrine is there, Bodhisattva behavior, Bodhisattva ethics, ethicization. And that takes place in the half of the project. You can say that the half time, this side, cleaning the field, the next half is for sowing the seed.
Professor, can we take question from Shipra Dikshit? Make it brief.
As many as possible, because the philosophers are very unhappy if they are not given 4 hours every day. Anyway,
thank you for wonderful presentation. And I'm not very good in Buddhism. My reading is so limited in Buddhism. But as you said, the entire Buddhism is based on Dukkha Nivritti, or it starts with Dukkha Nivritti. And as you explained that the ground is very, empirical ground is very strong in Buddhism. So Buddhism abandons both the world, like spirit and matter, it abandons. Unlike Sankhya philosophy, where it accepts the duality between spirit and like Prakriti and Purush, it accepts the duality. But my query is there any duality in Buddhism? I mean, you have explained in very initial presentation, like Chitta and Chitta Siddha mein ek duality hai. So is there any duality, I mean, between empirical world and inner world? Secondly, if the entire Buddhism is based on imaginative consciousness or stream of consciousness, so why this dukkha occurs, or why we need to nivrit from that dukkha if we can acquire that happiness from our stream of consciousness or our imaginative consciousness?
You see, I have never said that duality is not there, plurality is not there. I have not said. Another thing is that you are giving a situation in which you are born. Okay, you are born. You have not chosen your life, your birth. Now you are given. That external worlds are there, you are interacting. That is you don't have the control. But at the same time, through this kind of interaction in the external eyes and the external world, then what you get actually? You get inside the data, you can have some kind of information enters into my inner world. But that is not the same. Because it is transformed in a very different way and a structure. It's the mind which ultimately receives, and it is structure. You have the groceries in your kitchen, but that grocery of all sorts is not produced in your kitchen. It is coming from outside. So if you want rice paddy is not grown in your kitchen actually, but you don't know that this comes from this side. But then what the cooking is there, that cooking is, it depends on your sanskaras, on your knowledge, on your effort, etc. All sorts of things are there, which is a very different kind of thing, for example. So by inner and external world is going, mind and body, because all of them are produced from the interaction in mutual interactions of the four elements, basic elements, which are actually already, which constitute actually or make the nature itself. So nature is here. Who has made? It is not Buddha's concern. Buddha is not going for all sorts of, because that is wasted. How can you know? It would be purely speculative. And that's why this is in this world, and only you are responsible for that. So far as Sankhya is concerned, you try to understand between the Purusha and Prakriti. And in the so far as Purusha is concerned or Prakriti is concerned, Purusha is separate from this one, but at the same time, in some or the other way, the elements are in the sun. Sankhya evolution. So it's there somewhere, but the duality is, of course, duality is there.
Dr. Milan, you have a comment, you have some observation. We will end up with that last. The observations you have, Dr. Milan is. No, has raised hand or. No. No, he got disconnected somehow. So, thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for your time and very erudite scholarship. And
Thank you for inviting me, giving me
decades of research and teaching obviously results in, So you brought a lot of wisdom to the table. Thank you. And Dr. Munmoon, you have announcements for the next session?
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you, sir, for chairing this session. And I also would like to thank all our speakers for this session. Thank you so much, Professor Prasad, Professor Singh, and Professor Ravindra for this very, very insightful, comprehensive, and lucid presentation. Thank you so much for your time. And our next session, yes, we have 2 more sessions. Actually, 3 sessions we have again, and we will take a break now for 1 hour. And next session we are starting around 2:30. So I request all our speakers of the next session, please join us at least 10-15 minutes before. And next session will be chaired by Dr. Shakuntala Bara. So I also request Madam, please join us by 10 at 2:15 or 2:20. So thank you once again. I thank all our participants for being with us. Thank you so much.
Namaste, namaste, aap sabko.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.